The whip cracked through the desert air like a gunshot, and Lila Mercer's scream died in her throat. Bound to the punishment post in her torn wedding dress, she could taste blood and dust. The whole town of Red Mesa watched in coward silence as Silas Crow's foreman raised the leather again. No one would help her. No one ever did. But then, a stranger's hand shot out and caught the whip mid-strike, blood running down his wrist. His voice cut through the crowd like a blade. "That's enough." And in that moment, everything changed. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The sun hung over Red Mesa like a burning eye, unforgiving and merciless. It was the kind of heat that made men mean and women desperate, the kind that dried up rivers in mercy in equal measure. The town itself sprawled across the valley floor like a collection of broken teeth, weathered storefronts, a saloon with perpetually swinging doors, a church with a cross that leaned slightly to the left, as if even it wanted to escape this God-forsaken place. Lila Mercer had lived in Red Mesa for 23 years, and she'd learned early that survival meant keeping your head down and your mouth shut. But some things, some violations of the soul, couldn't be swallowed in silence. The wedding dress had been beautiful once, white lace imported all the way from St. Louis, with pearl buttons running down the back and sleeves that billowed like clouds. Her mother had cried when she first saw Lila wearing it, though whether those were tears of joy or sorrow, Lila would never know. That was 3 days ago, before everything fell apart. Now the dress was ruined, torn at the hem where she'd tried to run, stained with red dirt and sweat, one sleeve hanging by threads. But it was still a wedding dress, which made the spectacle all the more grotesque. "Bring her forward!" The voice belonged to Marshall Pike, a man whose star sat crooked on his chest and whose loyalty was bought and paid for by the highest bidder. In Red Mesa, that meant Silas Crow. 2 ranch hands gripped Lila's arms, their fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to leave bruises. She tried to wrench free, but they were stronger, and she was exhausted from a night spent locked in the town jail. They dragged her through the main street, and every step felt like a mile. The townspeople had gathered. Of course they had. Entertainment was scarce in Red Mesa, and public punishment was better than a traveling show. They lined the wooden sidewalks, faces shadowed by hat brims, expressions carefully neutral. Mrs. Chen from the general store. Old Tom Fletcher, who ran the stable. The Reverend himself, Bible clutched in his weathered hands, but saying nothing, never saying anything when it mattered. Lila's eyes swept across them, searching for one sympathetic face, one person who might speak up. But she found only averted gazes and tight-pressed lips. Fear had a way of making cowards of good people. "You all know why we're here," Marshall Pike's voice boomed across the square. He stood on the raised platform, usually reserved for speeches and auctions, his hand resting on his gun belt. Lila Mercer, daughter of the late Robert Mercer, was to be wed yesterday to Mr. Silas Crow, a union that would have brought prosperity to her family's failing ranch and honor to their name. Honor. The word tasted like poison. Lila wanted to spit it back at him. Instead, Pike continued, his voice dripping with theatrical disapproval, she fled the church, abandoned her groom at the altar, brought shame upon herself and disrespect to a man of Mr. Crow's standing. "I didn't abandon anyone," Lila's voice cracked as she finally found it. "I refused to marry a man I don't love. That's not a crime. It is when you gave your word." The new voice was smooth as whiskey and twice as dangerous. Silas Crow stepped out from the shadow of the saloon, and the crowd parted like he was Moses at the Red Sea. He was a handsome man, Lila would give him that. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. He dressed in expensive suits even in the desert heat, his boots polished to a mirror shine. Everything about him screamed money and power, and he wielded both like weapons. "Your father shook my hand, Lila," Silas said, walking toward her with measured steps. "He promised you to me to settle his debts. That's a contract, binding as any paper." "My father was dying," Lila shouted, and this time her voice didn't shake. "He was out of his mind with fever and pain. You preyed on a desperate man." I offered a solution to his problems. Silas stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woody and oppressive. I would have taken over the Mercer ranch, paid off his creditors, and you would have lived in comfort as my wife. Instead, he's dead, the ranch is forfeit, and you—" He gestured at her torn dress with something like pity. "You have nothing." "I have my dignity," Lila said through gritted teeth. Silas smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Dignity doesn't pay bills, sweetheart. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm willing to overlook this tantrum. We'll have a quiet ceremony tonight, and we can all move forward." "I'd rather die." The words hung in the hot air. Someone in the crowd gasped. Silas's smile vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. "That can be arranged," he said softly. Then louder, to Marshal Pike, "Proceed with the punishment." The punishment post stood in the center of the square, a thick wooden beam with iron rings bolted to it. It had been used for thieves and drunks, for men who'd gotten out of hand on Saturday nights. Never, in all of Red Mesa's brutal history, had it been used for a woman. The ranch hands forced Lila forward. She fought them now, really fought, driving her heel into one man's shin and clawing at the other's face. But there were too many hands, too much strength arrayed against her. They slammed her against the post and tied her wrist to the iron rings, pulling the rope tight enough to bite into her skin. 20 lashes, Pike announced, for breach of contract and disturbing the peace. "This is insane!" Lila twisted against the ropes, panic flooding through her veins. "You can't do this! This isn't justice!" "This is frontier law," Silas said, positioning himself where she could see him. "And I am the law in Red Mesa." It was true, and everyone knew it. Silas Crow owned the largest ranch in 3 counties. His cattle filled the valley, his men filled the saloon, and his money filled the marshal's pocket. What Silas wanted, Silas got, and right now he wanted to break Lila Mercer's spirit so thoroughly that she'd have no choice but to submit. The foreman stepped forward with the whip. His name was Dutch, a scarred bull of a man with dead eyes and no conscience. He'd worked for Silas for 15 years, and in that time, he'd done things that would make most men sick. This would be just another job. He unfurled the whip with a practiced flick, the leather kissing the dirt. Lila squeezed her eyes shut, trying to prepare herself for pain she couldn't imagine. "Wait," a woman's voice from the crowd. "Please, can't someone stop this?" "Shut your mouth, Clara," her husband hissed. "It's none of our business." "She's just a girl. I said shut it." Lila opened her eyes and saw the woman, Clara Watts, the school teacher, standing on the sidewalk with tears on her face. But Clara's husband pulled her back, and she disappeared into the crowd. The moment of hope died. Dutch raised the whip. "May the Lord have mercy on your soul," Reverend Parker said weakly from his spot on the sidewalk. The whip came down, but it never struck flesh. A hand, tanned and calloused, shot out and caught the leather in midair, inches from Lila's exposed back. The crack of the whip echoed like a gunshot, but it was the sound of blood dripping onto dust that made the crowd gasp. The stranger's hand was torn open where the whip had cut deep, blood running in rivulets down his wrist and forearm. But he didn't let go. He didn't even flinch. "I said that's enough," the stranger repeated, his voice low and dangerous. Every eye in Red Mesa turned to him. He'd appeared out of nowhere, or maybe he'd been there all along, just another drifter in the crowd that no one had noticed. He was tall, lean in the way of men who'd known hunger, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of sand. His clothes were worn but clean, his hat pulled low over eyes that burned with something fierce and uncompromising. Dutch tried to yank the whip free, but the stranger's grip was iron. "Let go, mister, or you're next." The stranger smiled, and it was nothing like Silas Crow's calculating expression. This smile was all edges and warning. "I don't think so." He pulled hard on the whip, so hard that Dutch stumbled forward. Then, with his free hand, the stranger delivered a punch that caught Dutch square in the jaw and sent him sprawling in the dirt. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Marshal Pike's hand went to his gun. Silas Crow's face turned the color of old brick. But the stranger was already moving. He produced a knife from his boot, a wicked blade that caught the sunlight, and in 2 swift cuts, Lila's bonds were severed. She collapsed forward, and he caught her before she could fall, one arm around her waist. "Can you stand?" he asked quietly. Lila looked up into his face, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't seen in Red Mesa for a long time. conviction. The kind of certainty that didn't bend for money or threats or guns. "Yes," she whispered. "Then stay behind me." He turned to face the crowd, keeping Lila at his back. His hand moved to his hip, and Lila saw the gun holstered there, old but well-maintained, the grip worn smooth with use. "Who the hell are you?" Silas demanded, stepping forward. His own men were reaching for their weapons now, a half-dozen guns against one. The odds were clear. "Name's Cole Maddox," the stranger said evenly, "and I'm someone who doesn't stand by while a woman gets whipped for having the courage to say no." "This is a legal punishment," Pike sputtered. "You're interfering with the law." Cole's laugh was harsh. "Law? This is a lynch mob dressed up in legal words, and I've seen enough of those to know the difference." "She broke a contract," Silas said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "She belongs to me." "Nobody belongs to anyone," Cole shot back. "That's not how the world works anymore, though I know there are men like you who wish it did." "Careful, Drifter." Silas's hand moved toward his own gun. "You're outnumbered and out of your depth. Walk away now, and maybe you live to see tomorrow." Cole's expression didn't change. "I've been outnumbered before. Doesn't scare me near as much as living with the kind of cowardice that lets a man beat a defenseless woman." The word hit like a slap. Several of Silas's men shifted uncomfortably. Being called a coward in front of the whole town, that was a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Silas's face contorted with fury. "Kill him!" For a moment, everything stopped. The wind died. The crowd held its collective breath. Lila felt Cole's body tense, coiled like a spring. Then Pike spoke up, his voice higher than before. "Now hold on, Mr. Crow. If we shoot a man in cold blood in front of all these witnesses, I don't pay you to think, Pike. I pay you to do what I say." "But sir—" "Do it!" The ranch hands started to draw their weapons. Cole's hand dropped to his gun. Lila closed her eyes, certain she was about to see him die for her sake. "Stop!" The voice came from an unexpected direction. Lila's eyes snapped open to see Clara Watts pushing through the crowd, her husband desperately trying to pull her back. She broke free and stood in the space between Cole and the guns, her arms spread wide. "No more blood!" she cried. "Haven't we all had enough? Silas Crow, you're a wealthy man. You can have any woman you want. Why must you destroy this one just to prove your power?" "Clara, get out of the way," Silas growled. "I won't. Someone has to stand up to you. Someone has to say that this is wrong." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't move. And in her defiance, something shifted. Old Tom Fletcher stepped down from the sidewalk, moving slowly to stand beside Clara. Then the blacksmith, James. Then 3 miners who'd been watching from the saloon steps. "The lady's got a point, Mr. Crow," Tom said carefully. "This has gone far enough." More people moved forward. Not everyone. Fear still held most of them in place. But enough. Enough to matter. Silas looked around at the faces, his jaw working with impotent rage. He was losing control of the moment, and he knew it. Finally, his eyes settled back on Cole. "You think you've won something here, Maddox? You think standing up to me makes you a hero?" "I don't care about being a hero," Cole said. "I just care about doing the right thing." "The right thing," Silas repeated mockingly. "The right thing is going to get you killed. You've made an enemy today, Drifter, and I have a long memory." "So do I," Cole said quietly. "And I remember every time I didn't act when I should have. I'm done with that." Silas stared at him for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Lila. "This isn't over, girl. You still owe me, and debts always come due." He turned on his heel and strode away, his men following like a pack of wolves. The crowd began to disperse, people drifting back to their homes and businesses, not meeting each other's eyes. The moment of courage was passing, replaced by the familiar weight of fear. Clara approached them, her face pale, but determined. "You need to leave Red Mesa," she said urgently. "Both of you, tonight. Silas won't let this stand." "She's right," Tom added, coming up behind her. "He'll wait until the town's asleep, and then his men will come for you. He can't afford to look weak." Cole nodded slowly. "I've got a horse at the livery. Miss Mercer, can you ride?" Lila realized he was speaking to her. She looked down at herself, still in the ruined wedding dress, her wrists raw from the ropes, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. Yes, I can ride." "Good. We leave in an hour." "Wait." Lila grabbed his arm, feeling the warmth of his skin through the torn sleeve. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Cole looked at her, and in his eyes she saw ghosts, old pain, ancient regret. "Once, a long time ago, I stood by and watched while something terrible happened to someone who didn't deserve it," he said quietly. "I was young and scared, and I told myself it wasn't my fight. That person died because I did nothing. I swore I'd never make that mistake again." "Who was it?" Lila asked. "My sister," Cole said. "Her name was Emma. She was 16. He didn't elaborate, and Lila didn't press. Some stories were too painful to tell standing in a dusty street with blood still dripping from your hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole just nodded. Then he turned to Clara. "Ma'am, do you know where Miss Mercer can get some riding clothes? That dress won't do for a hard ride." Clara glanced at Lila's torn gown and nodded. "Come with me to the schoolhouse. I have some things that might fit." As they walked through the thinning crowd, Lila felt eyes on her back. Some sympathetic, some condemning, all of them watching to see what would happen next. The women of Red Mesa didn't defy their men. They certainly didn't run away from wealthy suitors, and they absolutely never left town with strange drifters. But then, Lila had always been different. Her mother used to say she had fire in her blood, meant it as a warning, not a compliment. That fire had gotten her into trouble more times than she could count. It had made her question her father when he tried to marry her off. It had given her the courage to run from the church yesterday. And now it would carry her out of Red Mesa entirely. The schoolhouse was a small building at the edge of town, neat and tidy, with children's drawings pinned to the walls. Clara locked the door behind them and went to a trunk in the corner, pulling out a simple cotton dress, boots, and a split riding skirt. "These were mine before I got married," Clara explained. "They should fit well enough." Lila took the clothes gratefully and changed behind a partition, peeling off the ruined wedding dress and leaving it in a heap on the floor. The riding clothes were plain but practical, exactly what she needed. When she emerged, Clara was looking at her with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "I wish I had your courage," she said softly. "You showed courage today," Lila replied. "You stood up when no one else would." Clara shook her head. "Only because that stranger, Cole, gave us permission. But you were willing to take a whipping rather than compromise yourself. That's real courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like terror." "That's what courage is," Clara said. "Doing the right thing even when you're scared to death." She helped Lila braid her long hair and handed her a leather satchel with some basic supplies: dried meat, a canteen, matches. "It's not much, but it'll help." "Oh, why are you doing this?" Lila asked. "Your husband will be angry." "My husband is always angry," Clara said with a bitter smile. "At least this time it'll be for a good reason." They embraced quickly, and Lila felt tears prick her eyes. Clara was one of the few friends she'd had in Red Mesa, one of the few people who'd ever treated her as more than just Robert Mercer's troublesome daughter. "If I ever come back," Lila began. "Don't," Clara interrupted firmly. "Don't ever come back here. Find somewhere better. Live a life that's yours." Lila nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Then she slipped out the side door and made her way toward the livery stable, staying in the shadows. Cole was already there, saddling 2 horses. A sturdy roan for himself and a smaller paint horse that he said would suit her. His hand was bandaged now, the white cloth already showing red seepage, but he worked efficiently. "We'll ride northwest," he said as he worked. "There's rough country that way, canyons and mesas where it'll be hard to track us. We can follow the dry riverbeds to hide our trail." "Where are we going?" Cole paused. "I have a place, a ranch up near Iron Ridge. It's remote, more remote than this town, but it's safe. You can stay there until we figure out your next move." "A ranch?" Lila felt a flutter of something like hope. "You're a rancher?" "Among other things. I've been—" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been moving around a lot, but Iron Ridge is home, or as close as I've got to one." "And you're willing to take a complete stranger there?" Cole looked at her directly. "Miss Mercer, you stood up to a powerful man who wanted to own you. You chose a beating over submission. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. I'd be honored to help you." The sincerity in his voice made Lila's throat tight. "Call me Lila. And thank you. Again. Cole? He said with a slight smile. And you're welcome. Again. He finished with the horses and helped Lila mount. She settled into the saddle, feeling the familiar comfort of a horse beneath her. Her father had taught her to ride before she could walk, one of the few good things he'd given her. As they led the horses out of the stable, the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Red Mesa looked almost beautiful in that light, almost peaceful. But Lila knew the truth that lurked beneath the pretty surface. They rode out slowly, not wanting to attract attention. But as they passed the last buildings and headed into open country, Lila couldn't resist looking back one final time. She saw lights beginning to glow in windows as families lit their evening lamps, smoke rising from the saloon's chimney, the crooked church cross silhouetted against the darkening sky. And there, in front of the largest house in town, Silas Crow's mansion, she saw a figure standing on the porch, watching them leave. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze, the promise in it. This isn't over. Lila turned away and urged her horse forward. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. She would never again be bound to that punishment post, never again feel the helplessness of being at someone else's mercy. You okay? Cole asked, noticing her shiver. Yes, Lila said, and meant it. I'm free. For the first time in my life, I'm actually free. Freedom's a good start, Cole said, but staying free, that's where it gets tricky. They rode in silence for a while, the horses finding their rhythm on the hard-packed trail. The desert stretched around them in all directions, vast and indifferent. In the growing darkness, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Can I ask you something? Lila said finally. Sure. Your sister, Emma. What happened to her? Cole was quiet for so long that Lila thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. We lived in a town a lot like Red Mesa. My father worked in the mine. We were poor, but we were happy enough. Emma was special, smart as a whip, kind to everyone. When she was 15, the mine owner's son took a liking to her. He paused, his jaw tight. He wouldn't take no for an answer. One night he cornered her. When she fought back, he got rough. Too rough. She died from her injuries. Lila gasped. That's horrible. The worst part? Cole's voice was harsh. Everyone knew what he'd done. The whole town knew. But the mine owner had money and influence, just like your Silas Crow. So they called it an accident, said she fell, and His voice cracked. I was 17 and scared. I didn't speak up. I let them bury the truth with her. You were just a boy, Lila said softly. Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to have done something. Cole shook his head. I left that town the next day and I've been moving ever since, trying to, make up for it somehow. Is that possible? Making up for something like that? Probably not, Cole admitted. But I have to try. Every time I see injustice, every time someone needs help, I have to act. Because if I don't, I see Emma's face. I see her asking me why I didn't save her. They rode in silence after that, the weight of his confession hanging between them. Lila understood now why he'd stepped in when he did. She wasn't just a woman in trouble to him. She was a second chance, a way to rewrite the story that haunted him. The night deepened and stars began to appear overhead like scattered diamonds. Cole led them off the main trail and into rougher country, picking his way through rocks and scrub brush with the confidence of someone who knew the land. We'll ride through the night, he said. Put as much distance as possible between us and Red Mesa. Silas will send men after us, probably already has, but they won't expect us to push this hard. Most people would stop and make camp. Most people aren't running for their lives, Lila pointed out. Cole smiled grimly. True enough. They stopped only once to water the horses at a small spring hidden among the rocks. Cole checked his gun, reloading with practiced efficiency. Lila watched him work, noting the care he took with the weapon. Do you think it'll come to shooting? She asked. I hope not, but hope's not a plan. Have you killed men before? Cole looked at her steadily. Yes. I've been a soldier, a hired gun, a ranch hand, and a drifter. In all those roles, I've done things I'm not proud of. But I've never killed anyone who didn't deserve it, and I've never shot first. That's something, I suppose. It's not much, Cole said, but it lets me sleep at night. Mostly. They mounted up again and continued into the darkness. The temperature dropped as they climbed into higher country, and Lila was grateful for the jacket Clara had included in the satchel. The desert could be brutally hot during the day and surprisingly cold at night, a lesson every frontier dweller learned quickly. Around midnight, Cole called a brief halt. They didn't make a fire, just rested against some rocks while the horses cropped at sparse grass. Lila was exhausted, running on fear and adrenaline, but she couldn't sleep. Every sound made her jump, the scuttle of a lizard, the distant cry of a coyote, the wind through the canyon. "Tell me about Iron Ridge," she said, needing conversation to keep the fear at bay. Cole shifted position, looking out into the darkness. "It's not much." A small ranch tucked into a valley between two ridges. That's where the name comes from. The ridges are iron-rich, rust-red even in the rain. There's a creek that runs year-round, good grass for cattle, and enough isolation that a man can think in peace. It sounds beautiful. It is. Or it could be. Right now it's mostly potential. I bought the land 2 years ago with money I'd saved up. Built a cabin, started a small herd, but I've been gone more than I've been there. Can't seem to settle down even when I want to. What changed? Nothing. Everything. I'm tired, Lila. Tired of running from ghosts. Tired of trying to fix the unfixable. Maybe it's time I actually tried to build something instead of just wandering. His honesty surprised her. Most men she knew, especially men of the frontier, held their emotions close, afraid that showing vulnerability was the same as showing weakness. "I think building something sounds wonderful," Lila said. "I've never had the chance to build anything. Everything in my life was already decided before I could speak. Who I'd be, who I'd marry, what my future would look like. This is the first time I've ever made a real choice." "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," Lila admitted, "but also alive. More alive than I've ever felt." Cole nodded, understanding. Freedom usually is terrifying at first. It's easier when someone else makes all the decisions, but it's not living, not really. They fell silent, watching the stars wheel overhead. Lila thought about everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. This time yesterday, she'd been in her family's ranch house, steeling herself for a wedding she didn't want. Now that house was forfeit, her father was dead, and she was fleeing into the wilderness with a man she'd just met. It should have felt insane, and maybe it was, but it also felt right in a way she couldn't explain. "Cole," she said softly. "Yeah? Whatever happens, thank you. Even if Silas catches us, even if this all goes wrong, thank you for being the one person who stood up for me." "We're not going to get caught," Cole said firmly. "I promise you that." It was a promise he had no way of keeping, but Lila chose to believe it anyway. Sometimes belief was all you had. As the night wore on, they pushed deeper into the wilderness. The landscape changed around them, rocky canyons giving way to pine forests, the air growing thinner and cooler. They were climbing into the high country now, following paths that few knew existed. Just before dawn, when the sky was turning gray at the edges, Cole finally allowed them to stop properly. They'd reached a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, with a stream running through it. It was as close to paradise as the desert got. "We can rest here for a few hours," Cole said, sliding off his horse with a grunt. "The horses need it, and so do you." Lila dismounted stiffly, her legs protesting after hours in the saddle. Cole helped her, his hands strong and steady on her waist, as he lifted her down. For just a moment, they stood close, and Lila felt something crackle between them. Not just gratitude, but something more complex and dangerous. Then the moment passed, and Cole was turning away to tend the horses. Lila busied herself gathering pine needles to make a soft place to rest, trying not to think about the warmth of his touch, or the way her heart had skipped when he'd looked at her. "Focus," she told herself sternly. "You're running for your life, not looking for romance." But as she lay down on the pine needles and looked up at the brightening sky through the tree branches, she couldn't help wondering what might happen when they reached Iron Ridge. What would her life look like there? Would Cole keep his distance, or would that moment of connection grow into something more? And more urgently, would Silas Crow let her go, or would his pride demand vengeance? The question swirled in her mind as exhaustion finally claimed her. Her last conscious thought was of the whip cracking through the air and Cole's hand catching it, blood running down his wrist. Nobody belongs to anyone, he'd said. Lila fell asleep believing it. The sun woke Lila with fingers of light that pierced through the pine canopy and fell warm across her face. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back like a wave. Red Mesa, the whip, Cole's bloodied hand, the desperate ride through darkness. She sat up quickly, pine needles clinging to her clothes and hair. Cole was already awake, crouched by the stream with his sleeves rolled up, washing his wounded hand in the cold water. The bandage lay discarded on a rock, stained rust red. In the morning light, she could see the deep gash that ran diagonally across his palm where the whip had cut through skin and muscle. "You should have woken me," Lila said, getting to her feet and brushing herself off. "That needs proper tending." Cole glanced over his shoulder at her, and something in his expression softened. "You needed sleep more than I needed fussing over. Besides, I've had worse." "That's not the point." Lila came to kneel beside him, taking his hand in both of hers before he could protest. The wound was clean but deep, the edges still weeping blood when he flexed his fingers. "This could get infected out here. You can't just ignore it." "I wasn't planning to ignore it," Cole said, but he let her examine the injury without pulling away. "There's a medical kit in my saddlebag, some carbolic solution and clean bandages." Lila retrieved the kit and set to work with hands that were steadier than she felt. Her mother had taught her basic field medicine, a necessary skill for anyone living on a frontier ranch where the nearest doctor might be days away. She cleaned the wound thoroughly with the carbolic solution, trying to be gentle as Cole hissed through his teeth. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be. You're doing fine." His voice was tight with pain but steady. "My own fault for catching a whip bare-handed." "Your fault for saving my life, you mean?" Cole was quiet as she wrapped fresh bandages around his palm, securing them with neat knots. When she finished, he flexed his hand experimentally and nodded. "Thank you. That's better." "It's the least I could do." Lila sat back on her heels, suddenly aware of how close they were, how intimate the moment had become. She cleared her throat. "How far did we come last night?" "Maybe 30 miles, give or take. We're in the high pine country now, well north of Red Mesa's usual territory. But we need to keep moving. Silas won't give up just because we made it through one night." As if summoning the devil by speaking his name, they both heard it at the same moment, the distant sound of horses moving through the forest. Not close, but not far enough either. Multiple riders, from the sound of it, spreading out to search. Cole was on his feet in an instant, his good hand going to his gun. "How long have I got?" Lila asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. 5 minutes? Maybe 10. They're moving slow, trying to pick up our trail." He was already gathering their supplies, movements economical and practiced. "We'll take the creek bed. Water hides tracks." They saddled the horses in record time, both working with the efficiency of people who understood that speed meant survival. Lila's hand shook only slightly as she tightened the cinch on her paint horse, and she forced herself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Cole led them into the creek, the horses' hooves splashing in water that came up to their fetlocks. The current was gentle here, flowing north toward higher elevations. They moved upstream, the rocky creek bed leaving no prints, the sound of running water masking the noise of their passage. Behind them, the voices of the search party grew louder. Lila caught fragments of conversation carried on the wind. "Tracks end at the stream. Split up and check both directions. Crow wants them alive, but he didn't say in what condition." That last comment made Lila's blood run cold. Cole must have heard it too because his jaw tightened and he urged his horse to move faster, careful to keep to the middle of the creek where the water ran deepest. They followed the winding stream for what felt like hours but was probably less than one. The pine forest grew thicker, the trees pressing close on both sides, and the sound of pursuit gradually faded into the distance. Finally, Cole guided them out of the water and onto a rocky outcropping that would leave no tracks. "We need to get higher," he said, studying the terrain with a practiced eye. "There's a pass through the mountains about 10 miles northeast. Beyond that is rough country, canyons and badlands where even Silas's best trackers will struggle. And then? Then we're 3 days from Iron Ridge, give or take. 3 more days of running. 3 more days of looking over her shoulder and jumping at every sound." Lila felt exhaustion pulling at her bones, but she pushed it down. There would be time to rest when they were safe, if they ever were. They climbed steadily through the morning, leaving the pines behind for scrub oak and juniper. The landscape became more dramatic. Red rock formations jutting from the earth like broken teeth, deep arroyos cutting through the high desert plateau. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way that matched Lila's mood. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat some of the dried meat from Clara's provisions. They didn't talk much, both lost in their own thoughts. Lila found herself studying Cole when he wasn't looking. The strong lines of his profile, the way he moved with a kind of coiled readiness even when sitting still, the haunted look that sometimes crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. He caught her staring once and raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind?" Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was just thinking that I don't know much about you, beyond what you told me about your sister." "Not much to know. I'm 32 years old. I've been everything from a cowhand to a cavalry scout, and I'm trying to build something permanent for the first time in my life. That about covers it." "Were you in the war?" Cole's expression closed down. "For a while. Long enough to learn I didn't have the stomach for it." "Which side?" "Does it matter?" "Men died on both sides. Good men and bad men and boys who were barely old enough to shave. I saw things that—" He stopped, shook his head. "I don't talk about the war. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." "You're not prying. We're traveling together, maybe for weeks. You've got a right to know who you're trusting." Cole took a drink from his canteen and offered it to her. "What about you? What was life like before yesterday?" Lila accepted the canteen, taking a long swallow before answering. "Suffocating. My mother died when I was 14, and after that it was just me and my father. He was difficult. He drank too much, gambled more than we could afford, and every year the ranch fell a little deeper into debt. When he got sick, Silas Crow came around offering solutions. My father saw a way out. I saw a prison." "You didn't have other family? Anyone you could turn to?" "An aunt in Denver, maybe. But I haven't seen her since I was a child. For all I know, she's dead." Lila handed back the canteen. "I thought about running before, many times. But I didn't have money or skills or anywhere to go, and some part of me kept hoping things would get better." "They rarely do on their own," Cole said quietly. "Sometimes you have to force change, even when it's terrifying." "Is that what you did? After your sister died?" "Eventually. It took me longer than it should have. I spent a lot of years being angry and directionless, looking for fights, and finding them. It wasn't until I bought the land at Iron Ridge that I started to figure out who I wanted to be, instead of just running from who I'd been." Before Lila could respond, Cole's horse suddenly lifted its head, ears pricked forward. Cole was on his feet instantly, one hand on his gun, scanning the horizon. "What is it?" Lila whispered. "Riders. Still distant, but coming this way." They mounted quickly, and Cole led them into a narrow canyon, following a barely visible game trail that wound between towering rock walls. The walls rose 50 feet on either side, red sandstone striated with layers of ancient sediment. It was like riding through a cathedral made of stone, beautiful and claustrophobic at once. The canyon twisted and turned, branching into smaller passages. Cole seemed to know where he was going, taking turns without hesitation. Finally, he guided them into a tiny alcove carved into the canyon wall, barely large enough for 2 horses and 2 people, but completely hidden from the main passage. They waited in tense silence. Minutes passed like hours. Then they heard it, the clatter of hooves on rock, echoing weirdly in the confined space. The riders were in the canyon. "Spread out," a voice called. Dutch, the foreman. "Check every side passage. They came this way, I'm sure of it." Lila pressed herself against the rock wall, hardly daring to breathe. Cole had drawn his gun, holding it low and ready. Their horses stood perfectly still, as if sensing the danger. Footsteps approached their hiding spot. Someone was walking along the canyon, checking the walls. Lila could hear breathing, the creak of leather, the jangle of spurs. The sounds came closer, closer, and then stopped right at the entrance to their alcove. Through a crack between 2 rocks, Lila could see a man's silhouette. One of Silas's ranch hands, a lean man with a scarred face, whose name she didn't know. He was looking right at the alcove entrance, his head cocked as if sensing something. Cole raised his gun slowly, silently, His finger moved to the trigger. The ranch hand took a step forward. Then, from deeper in the canyon, Dutch's voice rang out. "Got something over here! Tracks heading east!" The ranch hand hesitated, then turned and jogged back toward Dutch's voice. "Coming!" The sounds of the search party faded as they moved off in the wrong direction, following whatever false trail they'd found. Lila finally released the breath she'd been holding, her whole body sagging with relief. "That was too close," she whispered. "They'll figure out their mistake soon enough," Cole said, holstering his gun. "But it bought us time. Come on, we need to get out of this canyon before they double back." They emerged from hiding and continued through the maze of stone passages, always climbing, always pushing north. The sun was past its zenith now, beginning its slow descent toward evening. They'd been running for nearly 24 hours with only a few hours of rest, and Lila could feel exhaustion settling into her bones like an old illness. But she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't make the miles pass any faster or the pursuers turn back. By late afternoon, they'd climbed out of the canyon country and onto a high plateau covered in sage and tough desert grass. The air was thinner here, making Lila's lungs work harder. In the distance, she could see the dark line of mountains Cole had mentioned, the pass that would take them into the Badlands and closer to Iron Ridge. They pushed on through the evening, not stopping even as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. The land here was empty of human presence, inhabited only by jackrabbits and sage grouse and the occasional coyote. It felt like the edge of the world, vast and lonely and indifferent to human struggles. As darkness fell, Cole finally called a halt at the base of a rock formation that would provide some shelter. "We'll rest here for a few hours," he said. "No fire. The light could be seen for miles, but we need to stop before we kill the horses." Lila slid from her saddle and immediately felt her legs buckle. Cole caught her before she could fall, his strong arms steadying her. "Easy," he said. "You've been incredible, but everyone has limits." "I'm fine," Lila insisted, though her voice was thin with exhaustion. "You're not fine. You're running on fumes and stubbornness." Cole guided her to sit against a rock and handed her the canteen. "Drink. Eat something, then sleep. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I'll rest later. Right now, keeping you safe is more important." Lila wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She drank water and forced herself to eat some dried meat, though her stomach rebelled at the idea of food. Then she leaned back against the rock and closed her eyes, intending to rest for just a moment. She woke with a gasp, jolting upright in the darkness. For a confused second, she thought she was back in Red Mesa, tied to the punishment post. Then Cole's hand was on her shoulder, solid and reassuring. "Easy," he said softly. "You're safe. You were dreaming." Lila's heart was racing, her breath coming in short gasps. The nightmare was already fading, but she could still feel the phantom crack of the whip, still hear Silas's cold voice declaring his ownership. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I didn't mean to, Don't apologize. You've been through hell. Bad dreams come with the territory." She noticed he was sitting close to her now, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cold desert night. "Did I wake you?" "I wasn't asleep, still keeping watch." "How long was I out?" 3 hours, give or take. It's past midnight now." Lila rubbed her face, trying to shake off the lingering dread from the nightmare. The moon had risen while she slept, bathing the landscape in silver light. It was beautiful and eerie at once, transforming the familiar desert into something alien. "Tell me about Iron Ridge," she said, needing distraction from her own thoughts. "What's it really like?" Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a warmth she hadn't heard before. "It's in a valley that runs north-south, protected on both sides by these high ridges that glow red at sunset. That's where the iron comes from. There's a creek that starts up in the mountains and runs year-round, clear as glass. Good grass in the valley bottom, enough for a decent-sized herd, cottonwoods along the creek, and quiet. Quiet like you wouldn't believe. It sounds like paradise." "It could be. The cabin's rough. Just one room right now, though I've got plans to expand. There's a small barn, a chicken coop I built last spring. I've got maybe 40 head of cattle, half a dozen horses. Nothing grand, but it's mine. No debts, no obligations to anyone." "Are there neighbors?" "Nearest ranch is 12 miles south. A widow named Mrs. Chen and her 2 sons. Good people. They helped me when I first arrived, taught me things about surviving in that particular valley. Beyond that, it's empty country all the way to the territorial border. Lila tried to imagine it, a place so remote that you could go days without seeing another soul. It should have sounded lonely, but instead it sounded like freedom. Do you ever get scared out there, being so isolated? Sometimes, Cole admitted, especially in winter when the snow comes. But mostly it's peaceful. I can think without noise, work without interruption, become whoever I want to be without anyone's expectations weighing me down. That's what I want, Lila said quietly, to become whoever I want to be. I've spent my whole life being told who I am and who I should be. My father's daughter, Silas is intended, Red Mesa's problem child. I want to find out who I am when all those labels are stripped away. Cole looked at her for a long moment, his face half in shadow. I think you're already finding out. The woman who stood up to Silas Crow and chose a whipping over submission, that's who you are. Everything else is just noise. I was so scared, Lila confessed. When they tied me to that post, I thought my heart would explode from fear. I almost gave in, almost told Silas I'd marry him just to make it stop. But you didn't. No. Because I realized that living in fear of what he'd do to me was worse than whatever pain I'd face for refusing. Some things are worth suffering for. That's courage, Cole said. Real courage isn't not being afraid. It's being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. They sat in companionable silence after that, watching the moon track across the sky. Lila felt something shifting between them, some connection deepening beyond gratitude and circumstance. She barely knew this man, yet she felt safer with him than she'd ever felt in Red Mesa among people she'd known her whole life. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. Of course. Yesterday, when you caught that whip, what were you thinking? In that exact moment? Cole considered the question carefully. I was thinking about Emma, about the moment I should have acted and didn't, and I was thinking that I wouldn't make that mistake again, no matter what it cost me. I've carried that guilt for 15 years, and it's heavy, but standing up for you, that made the weight a little lighter. I'm not your redemption, Lila said gently. You can't undo what happened to Emma by saving me. I know, but I can honor her memory by being the kind of man she deserved to have protecting her. That's something, at least. Before Lila could respond, both horses suddenly lifted their heads, ears swiveling toward the south. Cole was on his feet instantly, his exhaustion forgotten. Someone's coming, he whispered. They could see them now, a line of torches bobbing in the distance, maybe 2 miles away. 5, 6, 7 riders, maybe more, fanned out in a search line, sweeping methodically across the plateau. How did they find us? Lila breathed. They didn't. They're guessing, hoping to pick up our trail. Cole was already moving, gathering their gear with practiced speed. But they're getting closer. We need to move now. In the dark, Cole, the horses, we'll be fine. The moon's bright enough and they're sure-footed, but we have to go now. They mounted quickly and rode north, keeping to the hard pan where the ground was firmest. Cole set a pace that was fast but not reckless, trusting the horses to find their footing in the moonlight. Behind them, the torches continued their inexorable sweep across the plateau. They're not stopping, Lila said, glancing back. They're going to search all night. Silas must have offered a serious reward, Cole muttered. That's the only thing that would keep men in the saddle this long. How much of a reward, do you think? Does it matter? Could be $100, could be $1,000. When men are poor enough and desperate enough, they'll do anything for money. They rode hard through the night, always keeping ahead of the search line but never quite losing them. It became a grim game of cat and mouse, with Cole constantly adjusting their direction to stay in the shadows and avoid being spotted. The mountains grew closer, their dark bulk rising against the star-filled sky. Just before dawn, they reached the pass, a narrow gap between 2 peaks that Cole had mentioned. The trail through it was steep and treacherous, barely wide enough for a single horse. But it was also defensible, and Cole seemed to think that was important. If they follow us through here, we'll have the advantage, he said, studying the pass with a tactical eye. High ground, narrow approach. But I'd rather they didn't follow us at all. They pushed through the pass as the sky began to lighten in the east. On the other side, the landscape changed dramatically. Instead of high plateau, They found themselves looking down into a maze of canyons and broken badlands. Red rock formations twisted in impossible shapes, carved by wind and water over millions of years. It was breathtaking and disorienting at once. "Welcome to the Badlands," Cole said with grim satisfaction. "Best natural maze in 3 territories. Even experienced trackers get lost in here." They descended into the labyrinth as the sun rose, casting long shadows that made the landscape even more confusing. Cole navigated with confidence, following landmarks that were invisible to Lila's untrained eye. A distinctive rock formation here, a lone juniper tree there. By mid-morning, they were deep enough into the Badlands that Cole finally allowed them to stop properly. They found a small box canyon with a spring and some sparse grass for the horses. It was as close to a safe haven as they were likely to find. Lila slid from her horse and her legs simply gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, too exhausted to even care. Cole was beside her immediately, his face creased with concern. "I'm pushing you too hard," he said. "You're keeping us alive," Lila countered. "There's a difference." "Still, we need to rest properly, or we'll both be useless." He helped her to her feet and guided her to a spot in the shade of the canyon wall. "Sleep. I'll watch over you." "Cole, you haven't slept at all. I need you to trust me," he interrupted gently. "I've gone longer without sleep before. I'll be fine." Lila wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. She lay down on the hard ground and was asleep in seconds, not even dreaming this time, just falling into darkness like a stone dropping into a well. When she woke, the sun was past its zenith, and Cole was sitting nearby, his gun across his knees, staring at nothing. He looked exhausted now, the lines of his face deeper, his eyes shadowed. But when he saw she was awake, he managed a small smile. "Feel better?" "A little. Your turn." "In a bit. I want to put a few more miles behind us first." "Cole, don't worry about me, Lila. I'm tougher than I look." They rode through the afternoon, following the twisting passages of the Badlands. The rock walls rose high on either side, blocking out the sky in places, creating a sense of being in another world entirely. It was easy to believe that Silas's men would never find them here, that they'd escaped completely. But Lila knew better. Men like Silas Crow didn't give up easily. His pride was wounded, his authority questioned in front of the whole town. He would chase them to the ends of the earth if he had to, not because he loved her, but because allowing her to escape would make him look weak. As evening approached, they emerged from the Badlands onto rolling grassland. In the distance, Lila could see the first hints of the valley Cole had described, the iron-red ridges glowing in the fading light. "Is that it?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. "That's it," Cole confirmed. "Iron Ridge. We'll be there by tomorrow evening if we keep this pace." "Will we be safe there?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Safer than we are now. The valley's easy to defend and hard to attack. But safe?" He shook his head. "I don't know if anywhere's truly safe when you've made an enemy like Silas Crow." It wasn't the reassurance Lila had hoped for, but it was honest. And she preferred honesty to false comfort. They made camp that night in a grove of cottonwoods near a small creek, the first real shelter they'd had in 2 days. Cole finally allowed himself to rest, though he insisted on taking turns keeping watch. When it was Lila's turn, she sat with Cole's rifle across her knees and watched the stars wheel overhead, thinking about everything that had changed in just 3 days. 3 days ago, she'd been trapped in Red Mesa with no future but the one Silas Crow had planned for her. Now she was free, hunted and homeless, but free. The irony wasn't lost on her. When dawn came, they broke camp and continued toward Iron Ridge. The land grew greener as they descended into the valley, fed by underground springs and the creek that Cole had described. The grass was tall here, perfect for cattle, and Lila could see why Cole had chosen this place. As they rounded a bend, the homestead came into view. It was modest, a log cabin with a covered porch, a small barn, a chicken coop, and a corral. But it was solid and well built, and it represented something precious: independence. "Home," Cole said simply, and there was pride in his voice. They were still a half-mile from the cabin when a figure emerged from the barn, a young man, maybe 17 or 18, with dark hair and a rifle in his hands. He raised the weapon when he saw them approaching, then lowered it as he recognized Cole. Mr. Maddox, the young man called. Didn't expect you back so soon. Plans changed, Danny, Cole called back. Is everything all right here? Yes, sir, everything's fine. The cattle are good. Got 4 new calves last week. But there's been riders around. 3 men came through yesterday asking questions. Cole's expression darkened. What kind of questions? About whether anyone lived here, how long you'd been gone, stuff like that. I told them nothing, but Danny's eyes slid to Lila. I think they'll be back. Silas had found them. Cole's jaw tightened at Danny's words, but his voice remained steady when he spoke. How many riders did you say? 3, sir. They came up the South Trail around midday yesterday. Big men, well armed. The one doing the talking had a scar running down his face. Danny gestured along his own cheek. Looked mean as a rattlesnake. Dutch, Lila said quietly. Silas is foreman. Cole dismounted and helped Lila down, his hand lingering at her waist for just a moment before he turned his full attention to Danny. What exactly did you tell them? Just that I was looking after the place while you were gone. Said I didn't know when you'd be back or where you'd gone. They asked if anyone else lived here, and I said no. Danny's eyes flicked to Lila again, curious but respectful. They seemed disappointed, rode around the property for a bit, looking at everything real careful-like, then headed back south. Did they say anything else? Make any threats? Not directly, but the scarred one, Dutch. He said something as they were leaving. Said to tell you when you got back that Mr. Crow sends his regards. Then he laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. Cole's expression was grim as he processed this information. Lila felt her stomach knot with anxiety. They'd ridden for 3 days, pushed themselves and the horses to the limit, and still Silas had found them, or would find them soon enough. Danny, this is Lila Mercer, Cole said, gesturing to her. She'll be staying with us for a while. Lila, this is Danny Chen. His mother owns the ranch south of here. Danny helps me out when I need an extra hand. Danny nodded politely to Lila, clearly burning with questions, but too well-mannered to ask them. Ma'am? Any friend of Mr. Maddox is welcome here. Thank you, Lila managed, though her mind was racing. Your mother, is that Mrs. Chen from the general store in Red Mesa? Different Mrs. Chen, ma'am. My mother's Anna Chen. She came out from San Francisco after my father died, bought the Twisted Creek Ranch with money she'd saved. It's just her and me and my younger brother now. Danny's being modest, Cole said, leading his horse toward the barn. His mother runs one of the most successful operations in the territory. She taught me half of what I know about ranching in this valley. They settled the horses in the barn, brushing them down and making sure they had feed and water after their grueling journey. The barn was well kept, clean straw on the floor and the smell of hay and leather in the air. Through the open door, Lila could see the cabin and the surrounding valley, the red ridges glowing in the late afternoon sun exactly as Cole had described. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. Once the horses were settled, Cole led them to the cabin. It was a single large room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, a bed in one corner, and a small kitchen area. Simple, but solid, built to last. The kind of place where a person could make a life if they were given the chance. Cole immediately went to a trunk in the corner and pulled out a second rifle, checking it methodically. Danny, I need you to ride to your mother's place. Tell her what's happening. Ask if she can spare your brother to help us keep watch. I can stay, Mr. Maddox. Tommy's only 14, which is why I need you to make sure your mother and brother are safe, Cole interrupted firmly. If these men are as desperate as I think they are, they might try to use your family as leverage. I won't have that on my conscience. Danny looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded reluctantly. I'll head out now. But Mr. Maddox, I'll be back at first light with Tommy, whether you like it or not. You'll need the help. After Danny left, riding hard toward his family's ranch, the cabin fell into heavy silence. Lila stood in the middle of the room, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. Her legs were shaking, and she realized she was on the verge of collapse. Sit, Cole said gently, guiding her to one of the chairs. You need food and rest. Real rest, not just a few hours snatched here and there. We don't have time for rest. You heard Danny, they know where we are. They know where I live, but knowing and attacking are two different things. Dutch is cautious. He'll report back to Silas, and Silas will come with overwhelming force. That gives us a little time. Cole was moving around the kitchen as he spoke, pulling out supplies. Besides, you're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. He made a simple meal: beans and salt pork, bread that was only a little stale, coffee that tasted like heaven after days of nothing but water. Lila ate mechanically, barely tasting the food, but feeling strength seep back into her body with each bite. "What's the plan?" she asked when she could finally form coherent thoughts again. Cole sat across from her, his coffee cup cradled in his bandaged hand. "First, we fortify. This cabin has good bones, but it needs to be defensible. We board up the windows, set up firing positions, make sure we have clear sight lines. Second, we prepare for a siege. We've got a well right here on the property, so water's not an issue. Food we have plenty of. Ammunition." He gestured to the trunk. "Enough for a small war if it comes to that. And if Silas brings more men than we can handle, then we hold out long enough for help to arrive." "What help? You said yourself we're 12 miles from the nearest ranch." Cole's smile was thin. "Anachen has 4 ranch hands, all good men who can shoot straight. And 12 miles isn't that far when someone's sending up distress signals. But I'm hoping it won't come to that. I'm hoping Silas will see that taking this place by force will cost him more than it's worth." "You don't know him like I do," Lila said quietly. "He doesn't care about cost. He cares about control, about making sure everyone knows that what's his stays his." "You were never his. Try telling him that." They spent the rest of the evening preparing the cabin for what might come. Cole showed Lila how to barricade the windows with heavy shutters he'd built but never installed, how to position furniture for cover, where the ammunition was stored. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, and Lila wondered what other battles he'd fought in his complicated past. As darkness fell, Cole lit a single lantern and kept it low. "We'll take shifts through the night. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. I'll take first watch." "Cole, you've barely slept in 3 days, and neither have you. But I'm used to it, and you're not. Sleep now while you can. I'll wake you at midnight." Lila wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. She looked at the bed in the corner, Cole's bed, the only one in the cabin. "Where will you sleep when it's your turn?" "I'll manage. Don't worry about me." "I'm not taking your bed." "Yes, you are. I insist." When she started to protest again, he held up his hand. "Lila, I brought you here. You're under my protection. That means you get the bed and I get the floor. That's how it works." There was something in his tone that brooked no argument, not harshness, but absolute certainty. Lila realized that this was part of his code, the rules he lived by to make up for past failures. She was under his roof, therefore she was his responsibility, therefore she got the best of what little he had to offer. "Thank you," she said softly. She lay down on the bed, still fully clothed except for her boots. The mattress was thin and the blanket rough, but after 3 days of sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. She watched Cole settle into position by the window, his rifle across his knees, silhouetted against the faint starlight. "Cole," she said into the darkness. "Yeah? Whatever happens, I'm glad I'm here instead of Red Mesa. I'm glad I met you." She couldn't see his face, but she heard the smile in his voice. "Get some sleep, Lila. We've got a long road ahead." She drifted off with that thought, and for the first time since fleeing Red Mesa, she slept without nightmares. Cole woke her at midnight as promised, his hand gentle on her shoulder. She came awake instantly, heart pounding, before remembering where she was. Cole's face was lined with exhaustion, his eyes red-rimmed. "Your turn," he said. "Anything that moves out there, you wake me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone." "I won't. Get some rest." He lay down on the floor beside the bed, using his saddle as a pillow, and was asleep within minutes. Lila took up position at the window, rifle in hand, watching the moonlit valley for any sign of movement. The night was quiet except for the usual sounds: wind in the grass, the distant call of an owl, the soft breathing of the horses in the barn. But Lila's nerves were stretched tight, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible warning. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. If her father hadn't gambled away the ranch, if he hadn't gotten sick, if he hadn't promised her to Silas Crow in a fevered delirium, would any of this have happened? Would she be sitting in a remote cabin with a loaded rifle, waiting for armed men to come and drag her back to a life she didn't want? Maybe not. But she also wouldn't have discovered the strength she had inside her, the ability to say no even when the cost was terrifyingly high. She wouldn't have met Cole, wouldn't have seen that there were still men in the world who stood up for what was right, even when it was dangerous. The hours passed slowly. At 4 in the morning, Lila woke Cole as agreed. He came awake the same way she had, instantly and completely, hand going to his gun before his eyes were fully open. "Anything?" he asked. "Nothing. It's been quiet." "Good. Go back to sleep. I'll watch until dawn." Lila returned to the bed and fell back into uneasy sleep, her dreams filled with the sound of hoofbeats and the crack of whips, and Silas Crow's cold voice declaring that she belonged to him. Dawn came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Cole had started a small fire and was making breakfast. Eggs from the chicken coop, more of the bread, the last of the dried meat. They ate in silence, both too aware of what the day might bring to make small talk. Danny arrived just after sunrise, riding fast with another figure beside him. The newcomer was younger and smaller, with the same dark hair and quick eyes. Tommy Chen, clearly eager to be part of whatever was happening despite his youth. "Ma sent supplies," Danny said, swinging down from his horse. "Extra ammunition, dried beef, medical supplies in case things get rough. She also said to tell you that if you need help, send up 3 shots in quick succession, and she'll come running with every hand she's got." "Your mother's a good woman," Cole said, helping unload the supplies. "Though I hope it doesn't come to that." "What's the plan, Mr. Maddox?" Tommy asked, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent enthusiasm. "Are we going to have a shootout? I'm a real good shot, Danny can tell you." "The plan is to not have a shootout if we can avoid it," Cole said firmly. "But if it comes to that, yes, we'll need every gun we've got. Danny, I want you on the barn roof. You'll have the best vantage point from there. Tommy, you're with me in the cabin. Lila will be inside as well, covering the back window." They spent the morning continuing the fortifications. Danny climbed onto the barn roof with a rifle and some water, settling into position where he could see the entire southern approach. Tommy helped Cole reinforce the cabin door and set up additional cover inside. Lila loaded every gun they had, her hands steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. Around midday, Danny's voice called out from the barn. "Riders coming! From the south!" Everyone froze. Cole moved to the window and peered out carefully. Lila could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand tightened on his rifle. "How many?" he called back. "I count 8, no, 9. Spread out in a line." 9 men. Against the 4 of them, one of whom was a 17-year-old boy and another barely more than a child. The odds were not good. Cole's face was grim as he turned to Lila. "You remember what I told you? You stay inside, stay down, and only shoot if they breach the cabin. Understood? What about you?" "I'm going to try to talk to them first. Maybe we can end this without bloodshed." "Cole, they're not here to talk. They're here to take me back." "Maybe, but I have to try." He checked his gun, then looked at Tommy. "You stay inside with Lila. If shooting starts, you protect her first, understand? That's your primary job." Tommy nodded solemnly, suddenly looking very young and very scared. Cole stepped out onto the porch, his rifle held casually but ready. Lila moved to the window where she could see without being seen. The line of riders was approaching slowly, deliberately, letting the tension build. They stopped about 50 yards from the cabin, their horses shifting nervously. Lila recognized several of them, Dutch with his scarred face, a few other ranch hands from Silas's crew. And in the center, sitting tall on a black horse that probably cost more than most men earned in a year, was Silas Crow himself. He'd come personally. That told Lila everything she needed to know about how seriously he took this affront to his authority. "Cole Maddox," Silas called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nobody here belongs to anyone," Cole replied, his voice steady and strong. "This is private property, and you're trespassing. Turn around and ride back to Red Mesa." Silas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm willing to overlook the interference in Red Mesa. You didn't know the situation, and you acted on misguided chivalry, but now you do know. Lila Mercer is my intended bride. Her father promised her to me in exchange for settling his debts. That makes her mine by right and law. That makes her nobody's, Cole shot back. A woman's not property to be traded for debts. And even if she was, she's made it clear she doesn't want you. A man with any honor would respect that. Honor? Silas's voice dripped with contempt. You want to lecture me about honor? You're nothing but a drifter with a patch of dirt and delusions of heroism. I own half of Red Mesa. I employ 100 men. I have wealth and power you can't even imagine. And you think you can stand against me? I think I can stand up for what's right. That's all that matters. Silas's expression hardened. I'll make this simple, Maddox. Send Lila out right now, and you live. Your property stays intact. The boy on your barn roof, Danny Chen, isn't it? He goes home safe to his mother. Everyone walks away. And if I refuse? Then I take her by force, your cabin burns to the ground, and you die. Probably painfully. Dutch here has some creative ideas about how to handle people who cross me. Silas gestured to his foreman, who smiled unpleasantly. Your choice. But choose quickly. My patience has limits. Cole stood silent for a long moment, and Lila could see him weighing the options. 9 armed men against 4, including 2 teenagers. The smart play would be to hand her over, save his ranch, save the lives of the Chen boys who'd done nothing wrong except stand by a friend. But she knew he wouldn't. Not after what happened to his sister. Not after making her a promise. My answer is no, Cole said firmly. Lila stays here. If she decides to leave, it'll be her choice, not yours. Now get off my land before I start shooting. Silas's face contorted with rage. You stupid, stubborn fool! You're throwing your life away for a woman who means nothing to you. She means she's a human being with the right to choose her own path, Cole replied. And that's worth dying for if it comes to that. Inside the cabin, Lila felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever stood up for her like this. No one had ever valued her freedom more than their own safety. So be it, Silas said coldly. He raised his hand and his men reached for their weapons. But before anyone could draw, a new voice rang out across the valley. I wouldn't do that if I were you! Everyone turned. Coming up the northern trail was another group of riders, Anna Chen at the head, flanked by 4 tough-looking ranch hands. All of them were armed, and they had the confident air of people who knew how to use their weapons. Anna Chen was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she radiated authority. She rode right up to Silas's line and stopped, her hand resting on her rifle. Mrs. Chen, Silas said through gritted teeth, this doesn't concern you. When armed men threaten my neighbors and endanger my sons, it concerns me very much. Anna replied in a voice that carried clearly despite her size. Now I count 9 of you and 8 of us. Even odds. The question is, are you willing to risk half your men dying to drag one unwilling woman back to Red Mesa? This is a legal matter. This is a strong-arm robbery disguised as law, Anna interrupted. We all know it, Silas. That poor girl doesn't want to marry you. She ran away rather than submit. And now you've brought an army to force her compliance. What kind of man does that? The kind who enforces contracts and maintains order, Silas snapped. The kind who treats women like property, you mean? Anna's contempt was palpable. I came to this territory because I was told it was a place where a woman could make her own way, where strength and hard work mattered more than whether you wore a dress or trousers. But men like you want to drag us back to the old ways where women were bought and sold like cattle. Several of Silas's men shifted uncomfortably. Clearly, not all of us were entirely comfortable with what they were being asked to do. This is your last chance, Maddox, Silas called out, ignoring Anna. Send her out or face the consequences. Lila couldn't stand it anymore. She burst out of the cabin before anyone could stop her, striding across the porch to stand beside Cole. His hand shot out to steady her, but he didn't try to push her back inside. I'm right here, Silas, she called out. You want to talk about what's mine? Fine. Let's talk. My life is mine. My future is mine. My body is mine. You have no claim to any of it. Your father. My father was dying and out of his mind with fever when he made that promise. You know it. I know it. Everyone in Red Mesa knows it. You preyed on a desperate man and now you're trying to pretend it's legitimate. I offered you a good life, Silas said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. Comfort, security, status. Instead, you chose to run off with a stranger and live in poverty. What kind of sense does that make? It makes perfect sense, Lila shot back, because poverty with freedom is better than comfort in a cage. I would rather starve as my own woman than feast as your possession. You ungrateful, I'm done being grateful for scraps. Lila's voice rose, months of suppressed rage finally breaking free. I'm done pretending that I should be thankful for a man's attention even when it suffocates me. I'm done apologizing for wanting a say in my own life. I said no, Silas, and that should have been the end of it. For a moment, everything hung in balance. The two groups of armed riders, Cole standing solid beside her, Danny watching from the barn roof, Tommy at the cabin window. The whole valley seemed to hold its breath. Then Silas's hand moved toward his gun. Don't, Cole said quietly, his own hand dropping to his weapon. But Silas was too far gone in rage and humiliation. His pride wouldn't let him back down, wouldn't let him accept defeat in front of his men. His fingers closed around his gun. A shot rang out, but not from Silas or Cole. Danny had fired from the barn roof, the bullet kicking up dirt 3 feet in front of Silas's horse. The animal reared, and Silas had to grab the saddle to keep from being thrown. Next one won't be a warning, Danny called out, his young voice steady, despite the trembling Lila could see in his hands. Mr. Maddox is my friend. Miss Lila hasn't done anything wrong, and I won't stand by while you hurt them. The moment stretched. Then Tommy's voice joined Danny's, calling from the cabin window. Me neither. You want to get to them, you go through us. Anna Chen raised her rifle. And us, every last one of us. One by one, Anna's ranch hands brought their weapons to bear. The message was clear. If Silas wanted to take Lila by force, people were going to die. A lot of people. Silas looked around at the determined faces arrayed against him, and Lila could see the calculation in his eyes. He was used to buying loyalty, used to intimidating people into submission, but he'd never faced this before, ordinary people willing to risk everything simply because it was right. This isn't over, he said finally, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. You hear me, Maddox? This isn't over. I'll go to the territorial governor. I'll bring the full weight of the law down on you. I'll make sure you lose everything. Then I'll lose everything standing up, Cole replied calmly. But I won't bend. Silas jerked his horse's head around and spurred it savagely. His men followed, though several of them looked back with expressions that might have been respect or might have been shame. They rode south in a cloud of dust, disappearing back toward Red Mesa. As soon as they were gone, Lila's legs gave out. Cole caught her before she could fall, his arms strung around her waist. I've got you, he murmured. You're safe now. But even as he said it, they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Silas had retreated, but he hadn't given up. This was far from over. Anna Chen dismounted and approached the porch, her weathered face creased with concern. Are you all right, child? Lila nodded, finding her voice. Thank you. All of you. If you hadn't come, we look after our own out here, Anna said simply, and anyone Cole Maddox stands up for is one of our own. But Silas wasn't bluffing about going to the governor. He has connections, money to bribe officials. This could get complicated. Let it get complicated, Cole said, his arm still around Lila's waist. I'm not giving her up. Not now. Not ever. The words hung in the air, meaning more than he'd perhaps intended. Lila looked up at him and saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. Not just protectiveness, but something deeper. Something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Anna saw it too, and a knowing smile crossed her face. Well then, I suggest we all go inside and figure out our next move. Because when Silas Crow comes back, and he will come back, we need to be ready. They gathered in the cabin, making plans and drinking coffee, voices overlapping as they debated the best course of action. But through it all, Lila kept returning to the moment on the porch, to the weight of Cole's arm around her, and the promise in his words. She'd fled one man who wanted to own her. She couldn't afford to fall for another, no matter how different he seemed. But her heart, it seemed, had other ideas. The days that followed Silas's retreat fell into a rhythm that was part preparation, part ordinary ranch life, and part something Lila couldn't quite name. Each morning, she woke to the sound of Cole moving quietly around the cabin, starting coffee, checking the perimeter. Each evening, they gathered around the table, her, Cole, and whichever of the Chen boys was on watch duty that day, eating simple meals and discussing what needed to be done the next day. It should have felt temporary, this arrangement, a holding pattern until they figured out the next move. But somewhere in the routine of feeding chickens and mending fences and learning to shoot straight, Lila began to feel something she'd never felt before. Home. Anna Chen visited every few days, bringing supplies and news from the wider territory. The news was never good. Silas had indeed gone to the territorial governor, spinning a tale of a wayward woman and the honorable rancher trying to fulfill a binding contract. He'd paid for testimonials from Red Mesa citizens, bought statements from merchants her father had owed money to, painted himself as the aggrieved party. He's building a legal case, Anna explained one afternoon, sitting at the cabin table with maps spread before her. Trying to get a marshal sent out here with papers. Papers that would force Cole to hand you over or face charges of kidnapping and theft. Theft? Lila's voice rose with indignation. I'm not property to be stolen. In the eyes of some of these territorial judges, a woman promised in marriage might as well be, Anna said grimly, especially when the man making the claim has deep pockets. I've seen it before. Rich men using the law as a weapon against people who can't afford to fight back. Cole leaned against the wall, his arms crossed and his jaw tight. Then we fight anyway. We get our own lawyer, present our side of things. With what money? Anna asked gently. Lawyers cost, Cole. Good ones cost more than either of us have lying around. And even if we could afford it, Silas would just outspend us. He'd drag it through the courts for years if he had to. So what are you saying, that we should just give up, hand Lila over? I'm saying we need to be smart. We need to think beyond just defending what we have. We need to go on offense. Lila had been quiet, absorbing all of this. But now she spoke up. What do you mean, offense? Anna's eyes gleamed with something calculating. Silas's power comes from two sources, his money and his reputation. We can't touch his money, but his reputation? That's vulnerable. Think about it. A wealthy man chasing a young woman across the territory, trying to force her into marriage against her will. It's not a good look, especially with all the talk lately about women's rights and suffrage. You want to make this public, Cole said slowly, understanding dawning. I want to make it impossible for him to keep spinning this as a simple contract dispute. If enough people know the real story, if enough people see him for what he is, then even his money won't be enough to buy his way out of the shame. Lila felt a flutter of hope mixed with fear. But how? Red Mesa is under his thumb. Most of those people won't speak against him. Red Mesa, no. But there's a newspaper in Copper Springs, 50 miles east. The editor's a friend of mine, a man named Jack Holloway. He's not afraid to print the truth, even when it's uncomfortable for powerful people. Anna looked directly at Lila. But he'd need to hear the story from you, in your own words. The thought of telling her story to a stranger, of having it printed for everyone to read, made Lila's stomach turn. But Anna was right. Staying silent meant staying at Silas's mercy. When would we go? Tomorrow, you and I together. Cole stays here to watch the ranch. It's a hard day's ride, but we can make it there and back in 2 days if we push. Cole looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to insist on coming with them, but he nodded reluctantly. Danny and Tommy can help me hold things down here, but Anna, if anything happens, nothing will happen, Anna said firmly. Silas is busy in the capital right now, working his political connections. This is the best time to move. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She lay in Cole's bed, which she still felt guilty about occupying while he took the floor, and stared at the ceiling, thinking about what she would say to this newspaper editor. How did you sum up a lifetime of powerlessness in a way that made strangers care? You awake? Cole's voice came softly from the darkness. Yes. Can't quiet my mind. She heard him shift on the floor. Want to talk about it? Lila sat up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Cole was a dark shape against the faint starlight coming through the window, but she could feel his presence, solid and reassuring. I'm scared. Not of the ride to Copper Springs, but of what comes after. Once that story's out there, I can't take it back. Everyone will know about my father's debts, about Silas, about everything. You can still change your mind. We'll find another way. No, Anna's right. This is the smart play. Lila pulled her knees to her chest. It's just hard being this exposed. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible, trying not to make waves. And now I'm about to stand up in front of the whole territory and say, look at me, this is what happened to me. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then she heard him stand and move closer, sitting on the edge of the bed. Can I tell you something? That day in Red Mesa, when you were tied to that post, you weren't trying to be invisible then. You were the bravest person I've ever seen. I was terrified. That's what made it brave. You knew what was coming and you faced it anyway because the alternative was worse. That's the same strength you'll need tomorrow. And you have it, Lila. You've always had it. His words, spoken with such conviction in the darkness, made her throat tight. How do you know that? You barely know me. I know that you'd rather face a whipping than betray yourself. I know that you've been holding this ranch together for a week, even though you're exhausted and scared. I know that you check on the chickens every morning, and you've been teaching Tommy how to make proper biscuits, and you never complain, even though I know your whole body aches from the hard work. He paused. Maybe I don't know your favorite color, or what you like to read, or how you take your coffee, but I know the things that matter. Lila felt something crack open inside her chest, some carefully maintained wall crumbling. My favorite color is blue, like the sky right before sunrise. I like to read anything I can get my hands on, but I especially love adventure stories about people going to places I'll never see. And I take my coffee with a little sugar if there is any, but I'll drink it black if that's all there is. She could hear the smile in his voice. Blue like the sky before sunrise. I'll remember that. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lila said softly, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When this is over, when Silas is dealt with and I'm free, what happens then? Do I stay here? Do I leave? Do we—" She trailed off, not quite brave enough to finish the question. Cole was quiet for so long that Lila thought she'd overstepped. Then he reached out in the darkness and found her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they wrapped around hers. "I don't know what happens then. I don't want to make promises or claims when you're still figuring out who you are without someone trying to control you. But I can tell you what I hope happens." "What's that?" "I hope you choose to stay because you want to, not because you need to. I hope you build a life here that's completely yours, something you create, not something I give you. And I hope that somewhere in that life there's room for whatever this is between us." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But only if that's what you want. Only if you choose it freely." Lila felt tears prick her eyes. It was exactly what she needed to hear. Not possession or expectation, but possibility. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me as a person instead of a problem to be solved. For letting me find my own feet before trying to sweep me off them." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "Get some sleep, Lila. Tomorrow's a big day." He moved back to his spot on the floor, but Lila kept her hand extended for a moment, still feeling the warmth of his touch. Then she lay back down and, surprisingly, fell asleep almost immediately, more peaceful than she'd been in weeks. Anna arrived at dawn with an extra horse and provisions for the journey. She was dressed for hard riding, her hair pulled back severely and her face set with determination. Lila had dressed in the split riding skirt and sturdy boots, her hair braided tightly to keep it out of her face. Cole walked them to the horses, his expression torn between supportive and worried. "You take care of her," he said to Anna. "I will. And you take care of this place." Anna swung into her saddle with practiced ease. "Danny and Tommy will be here by noon. Don't do anything heroic without backup." "Wouldn't dream of it." Lila mounted her horse and looked down at Cole. In the early morning light, he looked tired but resolute, and something in her chest squeezed painfully at the thought of leaving him even for 2 days. "I'll be back soon." "I know. And when you come back, maybe some of this will finally be over." They rode east as the sun climbed, leaving the protective valley of Iron Ridge behind and heading into more open country. Anna set a steady pace, fast enough to make good time, but not so fast that they'd exhaust the horses. They rode in silence for the first hour, both women lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Anna spoke. "Cole's a good man. One of the best I've met out here." Lila glanced at her, surprised by the sudden declaration. "He is. He's also been alone too long, carrying too much guilt about things he couldn't control." Anna's weathered face was thoughtful. "I've known him for 2 years now, and I've watched him pour everything into that ranch, trying to build something permanent. But I always got the sense he was building it for someone. just didn't know who yet. Anna, I'm not meddling. Or maybe I am, a little. Anna's smile was wry. But I'm also just observing. The way he looks at you, the way you look at him, that's not nothing. And out here, where life is hard and short, not nothing is everything. Lila felt heat rise in her cheeks. I can't think about that right now. I need to get free of Silas first. Figure out who I am on my own. You're right. You do need that. Anna nodded approvingly. But don't take so long figuring it out that you miss what's right in front of you. Good men who see women as equals instead of possessions? They're rare as hen's teeth out here. They rode on, the landscape changing gradually from the red rocks and pines of Iron Ridge to rolling grassland dotted with scrub oak. They passed a few isolated ranches, saw cattle grazing in the distance, forded a shallow river that ran clear and cold. It was beautiful country, harsh but honest, and Lila found herself understanding why Cole had chosen it. They stopped briefly at midday to rest the horses and eat some of the food Anna had packed. While they ate, Anna told stories about the early days of her ranch, about coming west as a widow with 2 young sons and nothing but determination and saved money. My husband died in a factory fire in San Francisco, Anna said, staring out at the horizon. One minute we had a life, the next I had funeral expenses and no income. The factory owners offered me $20 compensation and told me I should be grateful. $20 for 15 years of my husband's labor and his life. That's horrible. It taught me something important, though, that there's no justice in the world except what we make ourselves. So I took what little money we had and I came out here, bought land that nobody wanted because it was too remote, too harsh, turned it into something valuable through sheer stubbornness. Anna looked at Lila intently. You have that same stubbornness. I saw it the moment Cole told me about you. Use it. Don't let Silas Croce or any man tell you what your life should be. They reached Copper Springs as the sun was setting. It was larger than Red Mesa, more established, with actual streets instead of just a main dirt road. There was a hotel, several saloons, a bank, and near the center of town, a small building with a sign that read, Copper Springs Gazette. Anna led them to a modest boarding house run by a woman she knew, and they secured a room for the night. Then, despite their exhaustion from the long ride, Anna insisted they go directly to the newspaper office. Jack keeps late hours, she explained, and we don't know how long we have before word gets to Silas that we're here. The newspaper office was a cluttered space filled with the smell of ink and paper. A printing press dominated one corner, and every available surface was covered with manuscripts, proof sheets, and reference books. Behind a desk piled impossibly high with papers sat a man in his 50s with ink-stained fingers and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Anna Chen, he said, standing with a smile. I heard you were in town. Don't tell me you're finally ready to take me up on that dinner invitation? Still married to my ranch, Jack, but I've brought you something better than dinner, a story. Anna gestured to Lila. This is Lila Mercer, and she's got something to tell you that your readers need to hear. Jack Holloway's expression shifted from friendly to professionally interested. He pulled out a chair for Lila and grabbed a notebook and pencil. I'm listening. Lila took a deep breath and began. She told him everything. Her father's debts, Silas's predatory offer, the forced wedding, her refusal in flight, the public whipping she'd nearly received, Cole's intervention, the chase across the territory, the confrontation at Iron Ridge. She left nothing out, not even the parts that made her look desperate or afraid. Jack wrote furiously, occasionally interrupting with clarifying questions. His face remained neutral, but Lila could see anger building in his eyes as her story progressed. When she finished, Jack set down his pencil and sat back, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. This Silas Croce, he's got money and political connections. Publishing this story could bring trouble down on my head. Lila's heart sank. I understand if you can't. I didn't say I wouldn't do it. I said it could bring trouble. But that's what journalism is, shining light in places where powerful people want darkness. Jack tapped his notebook. I'll need to verify some details, get statements from others if possible. But if even half of what you've told me is accurate, this is exactly the kind of story that needs telling. When would you publish it? Anna asked. Next issue comes out in 3 days. That gives me time to write it up, fact-check what I can, and get it to press. Jack looked at Lila seriously. But you need to understand, once this goes public, there's no taking it back. Silas will fight back. He'll call you a liar, try to destroy your reputation. Are you prepared for that? I'm tired of hiding, Lila said firmly. I'm tired of being afraid. If telling my story helps even one other woman stand up to a man who thinks he owns her, then whatever Silas does to me afterward will be worth it. Jack smiled, a genuine warm expression. You've got spine, Miss Mercer. I like that. All right, I'll do it. Front page, my editorial endorsement attached. We'll make enough noise that Silas Crow won't be able to bury this, no matter how much money he throws around. They left the newspaper office as full darkness settled over Copper Springs. Lila felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter from finally telling her story, heavier from knowing what would come next. Anna took her to a small restaurant for supper, insisting she needed a proper meal. They ate chicken and dumplings and fresh bread, and Anna told her more stories about the territory, about the other women who'd carved out lives here against impossible odds. There's more of us than you'd think, Anna said. Women who decided that conventional life wasn't for them. Some running from bad situations like you, others just wanting something more than what they'd been told they could have. We look out for each other because nobody else will. Is that why you helped me? Because I'm another woman fighting for her freedom? Partly, but also because you're important to Cole, and Cole's important to me and my sons. He's been a good neighbor and a good friend, the kind of man you want on your side when things get rough. Anna paused. And because when I look at you, I see my younger self, scared but stubborn, angry but hopeful, trying to figure out how to be free in a world that doesn't want women to be free. After supper, they returned to the boarding house. Anna went to bed almost immediately, exhausted from the long ride. But Lila sat by the window of their room, looking out at the unfamiliar street, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. Tomorrow, they would ride back to Iron Ridge. In 3 days, her story would be published. And then she would see if the truth was really powerful enough to protect her from a man like Silas Crow. Sleep came late and fitfully, filled with dreams of newspaper presses, and Cole's steady presence, and the moment she'd stood on that porch and declared herself her own. They left Copper Springs at first light, both eager to return home. Anna seemed pleased with how things had gone, humming tunelessly as they rode. But Lila couldn't shake a sense of foreboding, as if something bad was waiting just over the horizon. They were halfway home, riding through a narrow pass between two mesas, when Anna suddenly held up her hand. "Stop!" Lila reined in her horse. "What is it?" "I don't know. Something feels wrong." Anna's hand dropped to her rifle. "Stay close to me." They proceeded cautiously through the pass. Then, as they emerged into open ground, Lila saw what had alarmed Anna. Smoke, rising in a dark column from the direction of Iron Ridge. "No," Lila breathed. "Oh, no." They spurred their horses into a gallop, racing across the remaining miles with fear driving them faster than caution. The smoke grew thicker as they approached, and Lila could smell it now, burning wood and something else, something that made her stomach turn. They crested the final rise and looked down into the valley of Iron Ridge. Lila's hands went numb on the reins. The barn was gone, burned to a smoking shell. The chicken coop was destroyed. And the cabin, Cole's beautiful cabin that he'd built with his own hands, was damaged, one wall blackened by fire, though the structure still stood. But worst of all was the silence. No voices, no movement except for the smoke curling lazily into the afternoon sky. "Cole!" Lila screamed, kicking her horse forward. "Cole!" Anna was right behind her as they thundered down into the valley. Lila threw herself from her horse before it fully stopped and ran toward the cabin, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would break through her ribs. "Cole! Danny! Tommy!" Then she saw him. Cole was sitting on the ground with his back against the well, his head tilted back and his eyes closed. There was blood on his shirt, blood on his face, and he wasn't moving. Lila fell to her knees beside him, her hands shaking as she reached for his neck to check for a pulse. "Please, please, please." His eyes opened. "Lila?" Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. "You're alive, thank heaven, you're alive." "Takes more than Silas Crow to kill me," Cole said, though his voice was weak, though he gave it a good try. Anna arrived, immediately checking Cole's injuries with practiced hands.
Gunshot wound to the shoulder, looks like. Couple of cracked ribs from the feel of it. Burns on your hands. What happened? They came last night.
6 men, maybe 7. I couldn't get a good count. Dutch was leading them. Cole winced as Anna probed his shoulder. They said Silas sent them to deliver a message. When I refused to turn Lila over, they started shooting, set fire to the barn while Danny and Tommy and I were pinned down in the cabin. "Where are the boys?" Lila demanded. "Safe. I sent them out the back window when the shooting started. Told them to run to your place, Anna. Are they?" "I passed my ranch on the way here. If they made it there, my hands will take care of them." Anna was wrapping Cole's shoulder with strips torn from her shirt. "This needs a real doctor, but I'll do what I can for now." Cole grabbed Lila's hand with his good arm. "They said Silas is done being patient, done playing by rules. He's coming himself, and when he does, he's not leaving without you." His eyes bored into hers. "You need to run, Lila. Take a horse and ride as far as you can. Maybe head to Denver, find that aunt you mentioned." "I'm not running." "Lila, I said I'm not running." She squeezed his hand tightly. "I'm done running. You stood up for me when no one else would. You bled for me. You built a life here, and Silas burned it down because of me. I won't let him destroy anything else." "This isn't your fault. I know it's not. It's his, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Lila's voice was fierce. "That story will be published in 3 days. Silas doesn't know that yet. So we have 3 days to hold out. 3 days, and then the whole territory will know what kind of man he really is." Anna looked between them and nodded slowly. She's right. Once that story hits, Silas loses his political cover. No governor wants to be seen supporting a man who hunts women across the territory. We just have to survive until then. "Against how many men?" Cole asked grimly. "I barely held off 7. If Silas comes with his whole crew, then we get help." Anna stood, her face set with determination. "I'm riding to every ranch within 20 miles, everyone who owes me a favor, everyone who's ever been pushed around by Silas Crow, everyone who's tired of wealthy men acting like they own the territory. We'll have an army here by tomorrow night." "Anna, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm deciding." Anna looked at the burned barn, the damaged cabin, and her expression hardened. "I came to this territory because I was told it was a place where hard work and courage mattered more than how much money you had. But men like Silas Crow are trying to turn it into the same corrupt system we all left behind. Well, I'm done letting that happen without a fight." She mounted her horse and looked down at them. "Lila, you take care of Cole, get him inside, clean those wounds properly. I'll be back by tomorrow with reinforcements. We're going to make our stand here at Iron Ridge, and we're going to win." Anna rode off at a gallop, leaving Lila alone with Cole in the ruins of his homestead. She helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they limped toward the cabin. Up close, the damage looked worse. The whole east wall was charred, windows broken, furniture inside overturned and destroyed. But it was still standing, like Cole himself, battered but not broken. Inside, Lila settled Cole onto the bed and set about properly cleaning his wounds. The bullet had gone through his shoulder cleanly, which was fortunate. The burns on his hands from beating out flames were more worrying, but not life-threatening. As she worked, Cole watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Finally, he said, "You're handling this well. Most people would be falling apart right now." "I fell apart inside," Lila admitted, "when I saw the smoke and thought you might be dead. But then you opened your eyes, and I realized something." "What's that?" "That I can't keep living in fear of what Silas might do. Fear is what he wants. It's how he controls people. But I'm not afraid anymore. Or I am, but I'm not letting it stop me." She met his eyes. "Whatever happens in 3 days when he comes, I'm standing beside you. Not behind you, beside you." Cole reached up with his good hand and touched her cheek gently. "You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm just a woman who's tired of being treated like property." "No, you're a woman who looked at the most powerful man in the territory and said, 'I'd rather face ruin than submit to you.' That's not ordinary. That's revolutionary." Lila felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming emotion of being seen, truly seen, for who she was. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You just didn't know it yet." Cole's thumb traced along her cheekbone.
I just gave you a safe place to discover your own strength." They stayed like that for a long moment, the space between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Lila gently pulled away, finishing the bandaging with shaking hands. "You should rest. You've lost blood and you need your strength." "What are you going to do?" "Start cleaning up this mess. And then I'm going to stand watch while you sleep, like you've done for me so many times." She picked up his rifle and checked that it was loaded. "Get some rest, Cole. The real fight hasn't even started yet." As darkness fell over Iron Ridge, Lila sat at the broken window with the rifle across her knees, watching the valley for any sign of movement. Behind her, Cole's breathing gradually deepened into sleep. The ruins of the barn smoldered in the distance, sending up occasional sparks that looked like dying stars. 3 days until the story published. 3 days until the whole territory knew the truth about Silas Crow. 3 days to survive. Lila checked the rifle again and settled in for a long night. She'd spent her whole life being told she was weak, that she needed a man's protection. But tonight, she was the protection. She was the one standing guard while a good man slept. She was the one who'd refused to run even when staying meant danger. And in that moment, sitting in a damaged cabin with a loaded gun and a heart full of determination, Lila Mercer finally understood who she really was. Not Robert Mercer's daughter, not Silas Crow's intended, not even Cole Maddox's rescued damsel. She was her own woman, and that was worth fighting for. Dawn came cold and gray, mist clinging to the valley floor like the breath of ghosts. Lila had maintained her vigil through the night, her eyes burning with exhaustion, but her grip on the rifle never wavering. Every sound had set her heart racing, the cry of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the burned timbers of the barn, the distant sound of the creek running over stones. But no riders had come. Not yet. Cole woke with a groan, his face pale but his eyes clear. He tried to sit up too quickly and gasped with pain. Lila was at his side immediately, helping him ease into a sitting position. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I got shot and then beat to hell," which is accurate. Cole flexed his bandaged hands carefully. "But I'll live. Any sign of trouble?" "Nothing. It's been quiet all night." "That won't last. Silas is planning something." Cole struggled to his feet, waving off Lila's attempt to help him. "I need to assess the damage, figure out what we can salvage." They spent the morning sorting through the ruins. The barn was a total loss. Nothing but charred beams and ash where Cole's tools and winter feed had been stored. The chicken coop was destroyed, though miraculously a few chickens had escaped and were pecking nervously in the grass. The cabin was damaged but structurally sound, and most of the supplies inside had survived. As they worked, Lila kept glancing at the southern trail, expecting at any moment to see Silas and his army of hired guns cresting the ridge. But the valley remained empty, eerily peaceful in the morning light. Around noon, horses appeared, but from the north, not the south. Anna Chen rode at the head of a group of 12 riders, a ragtag collection of ranchers, ranch hands, and townspeople from Copper Springs. Danny and Tommy rode beside her, both boys looking shaken but determined. "We came as fast as we could," Anna said, dismounting. She looked at the burned barn and her lips thinned. "Worse than I thought." "You brought an army," Cole said, clearly overwhelmed. "I brought neighbors, friends, people who are tired of letting bullies run roughshod over decent folk." Anna gestured to the assembled group. "Some of these men have been pushed around by Silas before. Others just believe in standing up for what's right. And a few owe me favors I'm calling in." One of the riders, a grizzled man with a gray beard, spat tobacco juice and grinned at Cole. "Besides, hasn't been a good fight in these parts for years. Getting old and bored. This'll be fun." "Fun isn't the word I'd use," Cole muttered, but he was smiling despite himself. "Thank you, all of you. This means more than I can say." The group set to work immediately, transforming Iron Ridge into a defensible position. They reinforced the cabin walls with extra timber, created firing positions behind the well and the remains of the barn, established clear lines of sight in all directions. Anna had brought extra ammunition, food supplies, and medical supplies, everything they'd need for a siege. As the afternoon wore on, more people arrived. Word had spread through the territory with surprising speed, and it seemed that Silas Crow had more enemies than even Anna had known.
A widow whose ranch Silas had tried to buy for a fraction of its worth. A prospector whose claims Silas had jumped using legal technicalities. A saloon owner from a neighboring town who'd been run out of Red Mesa for refusing to extend Silas unlimited credit. By evening, they had 23 people ready to defend Iron Ridge. Not professional soldiers or gunfighters. Just ordinary people who'd reached their limit of what they'd tolerate from a man who thought money made him untouchable. That night, they gathered around a fire built in the open space where the barn had stood. Anna produced coffee and jerky, and someone else had brought whiskey that was passed around to ward off the chill. The mood was surprisingly light considering what was coming. People told stories, shared jokes, sang a few old songs that echoed off the valley walls. Cole sat beside Lila, his injured shoulder making him move stiffly but his spirits lifted by the show of support.
"I never expected this," he said quietly. "I thought we'd be facing Silas alone." "You stood up when others wouldn't," Lila replied. "People remember that, and they're tired of being afraid." "Are you still afraid?" Lila considered the question honestly. "Yes, but it's different now. Before I was afraid of what he'd do to me if he won. Now I'm afraid of what might happen to all these people who came here because of me. That's a heavier burden." "They didn't come because of you.
They came because of him." Cole's voice was firm. "Don't carry that weight alone. This is bigger than one woman refusing one marriage. This is about whether the frontier is going to be a place where might makes right, or whether ordinary people get a say in how things work." Around the fire, someone started singing a ballad about an outlaw who'd stood against a corrupt sheriff. The words were different, but the sentiment was the same. The little guy fighting back against power that thought itself invincible. Others joined in, their voices rising into the night sky, defiant and strong. Anna came to sit with them, her weathered face thoughtful in the firelight. "Tomorrow's the second day. The story publishes day after tomorrow, so we need to hold out for—" "They're coming tonight," Cole interrupted. Both women looked at him. "How do you know?" Lila asked. "Because if I were Silas, I'd attack when I thought we'd least expect it. He knows we know he's coming, so he'll come when we're tired and our guard is down, when we think we have another day to prepare." Cole stood, his voice carrying to the group around the fire. "Everyone needs to be ready, full watch rotation starting now. No one sleeps without someone else awake and armed. If they come, it'll be in the darkest part of night." The mood shifted immediately from relaxed to alert. The singing stopped. People checked their weapons, took up positions. The valley fell into tense silence broken only by the crackling of the fire and the restless movement of horses. Lila took up position at the cabin's west window, her rifle loaded and ready. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound was a potential threat. Beside her, Tommy Chen breathed in short, nervous bursts, his young hands white-knuckled on his rifle. "You don't have to be here," Lila told him softly. "You're just a boy. This isn't your fight." "I'm 15, Tommy said with wounded dignity. "That's old enough to know right from wrong. And this?" He gestured at the valley around them. "This is wrong. Mr. Maddox is a good man. You're a good woman. And Silas Crow is a bully who needs to learn that not everything can be bought." His words, spoken with such conviction from someone so young, made Lila's throat tight. "You're brave. Your mother must be very proud." "She's terrified," Tommy admitted. "But she's also the one who told Danny and me to ride back here. She said some things are worth fighting for, even when you're scared." The moon rose, casting silver light across the valley. The temperature dropped steadily, making everyone's breath visible in the cold air. Lila pulled her jacket tighter and kept her eyes on the darkness beyond the firelight. It was perhaps 3 hours before dawn when Cole's voice rang out sharp and urgent. "They're here! Southridge!" Lila's heart leaped into her throat as she peered into the darkness. At first she saw nothing, then gradually shapes began to resolve, riders, lots of them, moving slowly down the southern trail. They weren't trying to be stealthy anymore. They wanted to be seen, wanted the fear of their numbers to break the defender's spirit before the first shot was fired. "Count them," Anna called out from her position. 20? 25, 30 at least, someone reported. Maybe more behind those first ranks. 30 armed men against their 23, and many of theirs were not professional fighters. The odds were not good. But then Lila remembered something Jack Holloway had said at the newspaper office.
Spine, he'd called it. The quality that made someone stand up even when the odds were against them. She had it. Cole had it. Everyone in this valley had it. And maybe that would be enough. The riders stopped about 100 yards out, just beyond easy rifle range. They sat their horses in an intimidating line, silhouetted against the starlit sky. Then one rider moved forward alone, and even from this distance, Lila recognized him. Silas Crow, dressed in black, sitting straight in his saddle like a general surveying a battlefield. Cole Maddox. Silas's voice carried clearly in the still night air. This is your last chance. Send Lila Mercer out and everyone else lives. Refuse and I'll burn this entire valley to the ground with all of you in it. Cole stepped out onto the porch, moving carefully because of his injuries, but standing tall. This is my land, Silas. You're trespassing, and these people you see defending it? They're free citizens making their own choices. You have no authority here. I have 30 armed men. That's all the authority I need. That's all you've ever had, Cole shot back. Guns and money. But you know what you don't have? Loyalty, respect, the kind of strength that comes from being right instead of just being powerful. Silas laughed, a harsh sound without humor. Philosophy won't stop bullets, Maddox, and you're outnumbered. Maybe. But every man on your side is there because you paid him. Everyone on my side is here because they chose to be. When the shooting starts, which group do you think will fight harder? There was a moment of silence. Then Silas's voice came back, colder now. So be it. You've chosen death over sense. Don't say I didn't give you a chance. He wheeled his horse and rode back to his line. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Silas raised his hand and brought it down in a sharp gesture. The first volley of gunfire shattered the night. Bullets slammed into the cabin walls, shattered the remaining windows, kicked up dirt in the yard. The defenders returned fire immediately, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like lethal fireflies. The sound was deafening, rifles cracking, men shouting, horses screaming in fear. Lila fired her rifle at a shadowy figure, saw him duck, couldn't tell if she'd hit him. She reloaded with shaking hands and fired again. Beside her, Tommy was shooting steadily, his face set with concentration. They're trying to flank us! Anna's voice cut through the chaos. East side! Several of their defenders swung their aim toward the eastern approach, where a group of Silas's men were trying to circle around. Concentrated fire drove them back, but it was clear that Silas had more men to throw at them than they could easily handle. The battle raged through the darkest hours of night, a confusion of sound and smoke and fear. Lila lost track of how many times she fired, how many times she reloaded. Her shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil, her eyes stung from smoke, her ears rang from the constant gunfire. Then, as false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, something changed. The gunfire from Silas's side became less coordinated, more sporadic. Voices shouted in confusion and anger. The attack faltered. "What's happening?" Lila called to Cole. "I don't know. Hold your fire unless you have a clear target." The shooting gradually died away to nothing. In the sudden silence, they could hear voices arguing among Silas's men. Then riders began to pull back, not in an organized retreat, but in a confused withdrawal. Some rode away entirely, disappearing into the pre-dawn darkness. Within 15 minutes, Silas's 30 riders had dwindled to perhaps 15. They regrouped farther back, clearly shaken and uncertain. What made them break? Anna wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected direction. A single rider appeared from the north. Not one of theirs, but someone new. He rode slowly toward the cabin, carrying a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel, a flag of truce. Cole limped out to meet him, his good hand on his gun but not drawing it. Lila followed despite his gesture to stay back. She'd earned the right to be part of this. The rider was a young man, maybe 25, with a scared face and nervous eyes. "Mr. Maddox, I'm Jeremy Walsh. I ride for Silas Crow, or I did until about 10 minutes ago." "What do you want, Walsh?" "To tell you what happened. About an hour into the fighting, a rider came from Copper Springs. He had copies of tomorrow's newspaper. Someone paid him to ride them out early so we'd see." Walsh pulled a folded paper from his jacket and held it out. "The story's out, Mr. Maddox. The whole territory's going to know what Silas did." Cole took the paper and unfolded it. Even in the dim light, Lila could see the headline printed in bold letters across the front page. "Frontier Baron Huntswoman Who Refused Him. The True Story of Silas Crow's Campaign of Terror." Below it was her story, told in Jack Holloway's clear prose. Every detail she'd shared, every injustice, every moment of fear and defiance. And at the bottom, an editorial that didn't pull punches. This newspaper stands with Lila Mercer and against the kind of predatory behavior that treats women as property. Mr. Crow's actions are not just morally reprehensible, they represent everything the frontier should reject. Once the boys started passing that around, opinions changed fast, Walsh continued. Most of us thought we were just helping enforce a legal contract. We didn't know the whole story. We didn't know Silas had been hunting a woman across half the territory just because she said no. His expression was disgusted. I got sisters. I ain't gonna shoot at people defending a woman's right to choose her own life. How many others feel the same way? Cole asked. At least half who rode out here. We've left. Won't be part of this anymore. Walsh looked back toward where Silas's remaining men waited. But the others, the ones who stuck around, they're the true believers. The ones loyal to Silas no matter what. They'll keep fighting because that's what he's paying them for. Thank you for telling us, Cole said, and for having the courage to walk away. Walsh nodded and turned his horse. For what it's worth, I hope you win. Both of you. Then he rode off into the growing dawn, heading away from both groups. Lila looked at the newspaper in Cole's hands, at her name printed there for all to see. It worked. Jack got it out early. He must have suspected what would happen. Wanted to give us a fighting chance. Cole's voice was filled with admiration and relief. But Walsh is right. The ones still with Silas won't care about public opinion. We're not done yet. They returned to the cabin to find their defenders in better spirits despite the long night of fighting. The news that Silas's force had been cut in half spread quickly, renewing everyone's determination. They'd held through the darkest hours. Surely they could hold a while longer. As full dawn broke over the valley, they could see Silas's remaining men more clearly. 15 riders, all of them hard-looking men with the eyes of those who'd do anything for money. Silas himself sat in the center, rigid with fury, staring at the cabin like he could burn it down through sheer force of will. He's not going to leave, Anna said quietly. Not now. His reputation is ruined, his power is broken, but if he leaves without you, Lila, he's got nothing. He'll fight to the death rather than admit defeat. Then we'll give him death if that's what he wants, Cole said grimly. But Lila was thinking about something else. An idea was forming, dangerous but potentially decisive. What if I go out there? Absolutely not, Cole said immediately. Hear me out. Silas wants me. His whole crusade has been about controlling me, owning me, proving that his will can't be denied. What if I take that away from him? What if I face him, not as a victim, but as someone making her own choice? Lila, he'll kill you or drag you away. I won't allow that. You won't allow? Lila turned to face him fully. Cole Maddox, you've been wonderful. You've protected me and stood up for me, and I'm grateful beyond words. But I'm not yours to allow or forbid. I'm my own woman, and this is my choice. Cole looked stricken, but after a moment he nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. But if you're going out there, I'm coming with you. Cole, you're injured. I said I'm coming with you. Not to protect you, but to stand beside you. There's a difference. Anna put a hand on Lila's shoulder. If you're both going, we'll have every rifle trained on Silas and his men. If they so much as twitch wrong, we'll cut them down. Lila took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then she and Cole walked out of the relative safety of the cabin into the open ground between the two forces. The morning sun was just clearing the eastern ridge, painting everything in shades of gold and red. Silas saw them coming and spurred his horse forward to meet them halfway. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage, his eyes burning with something close to madness. This was a man whose entire world had collapsed overnight, and he had nothing left to lose. Have you come to surrender? He asked Lila, his voice tight. No, I've come to tell you to leave. It's over, Silas. Your reputation is destroyed. Half your men have abandoned you. The territorial governor will be reading that newspaper story right about now, and you can bet he won't want to be associated with you anymore. You've lost everything by trying to possess one woman who didn't want you. I haven't lost! Silas's voice rose to a shout. You're coming back with me, and we're getting married, and things will go back to how they should be. Listen to yourself, Lila said, almost pitying him. You really believe you can force this? that if you just apply enough pressure, enough violence, I'll suddenly want you. But that's not how human beings work, Silas. You can't make someone love you. You can't make someone choose you. All you can do is make yourself worth choosing, and you're not. You never were. Silas's hand dropped to his gun. Cole's hand moved toward his own weapon despite his injuries. Time seemed to slow down, every breath sharp and clear. "Silas Crow!" A new voice rang out across the valley. Everyone turned to see another group of riders approaching, but these wore badges. Federal marshals, 5 of them, led by a tall man with steel-gray hair and an air of absolute authority. The lead marshal rode forward, his hand resting on his gun. "Silas Crow, I'm Marshal James Warren, appointed by the territorial governor. I'm placing you under arrest for assault, arson, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. There's a full list of charges, but we can go over those on the way back to the capital." Silas looked around wildly, seeing his options dwindling to nothing. His remaining men were already backing away, not willing to add fighting federal marshals to their list of crimes. He was alone, completely alone, for perhaps the first time in his privileged life. "This isn't legal," he sputtered. "I have rights. I have lawyers." "Then they can meet you in the territorial prison," Marshal Warren said calmly. "Now you can come peacefully, or my men can drag you. Your choice." For a moment it seemed like Silas might try to fight. His hand was still on his gun, his face contorted with desperate fury. But then something in him broke. His shoulders slumped, his hand fell away from his weapon, and he suddenly looked like what he was. A bitter, defeated man who'd destroyed everything because he couldn't accept the word no. 2 marshals moved forward and took him into custody, binding his hands and confiscating his weapons. As they led him away, he looked back at Lila one last time. "I would have given you everything," he said, and there was genuine confusion in his voice, as if he truly couldn't understand why his wealth hadn't been enough. "You couldn't give me the one thing I needed," Lila replied quietly. "Freedom. And nobody can give you something that belongs to you by right." They took him away, the remaining marshals following. His hired guns scattered like leaves in the wind, wanting no part of what was coming. Within minutes, the valley was empty of everyone except the defenders of Iron Ridge. A cheer went up from the cabin and barn ruins. People were hugging, laughing, crying with relief. They'd done it. They'd stood against power and money and violence, and they'd won. Cole turned to Lila, his face showing exhaustion and pain and something else, something warm and wondering. "You did it. You faced him down." "We did it," Lila corrected. "All of us together." Anna came out to join them, tears streaming down her weathered face. The territorial governor must have acted the moment he read that newspaper story. Sent the marshals immediately. That's the power of truth, children. When enough people know what really happened, even the powerful can't hide anymore. Over the next few hours, people began to drift away, heading back to their own ranches and lives. But they left with something they hadn't had before. The knowledge that ordinary people could stand up to bullies and win. That the frontier could be what they wanted it to be, not just what wealthy men decided. Anna lingered the longest, helping them start the cleanup process. "You'll need help rebuilding that barn," she said. "Danny and Tommy and I will be back next week with lumber and hands. We'll get you set up again." "Anna, I can't," Cole began. "Yes, you can, and you will, because that's what neighbors do." Anna looked at both of them with a knowing smile. "Besides, something tells me this ranch is about to become a 2-person operation. You'll need that extra space." After she left, Lila and Cole stood in the yard surveying the damage. It looked overwhelming, so much to rebuild, so much to repair. But the foundation was still good. The land was still theirs. And they had time now, without fear hanging over them. "What happens now?" Cole asked quietly. "I meant what I said before. You're free, Lila, truly free. You can go anywhere, do anything. Denver, San Francisco, back east if you want. You're not bound to this place or to me." Lila looked around at the valley, at the red ridges glowing in the late afternoon sun, at the creek running clear and cold, at the damaged cabin that somehow still felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. "What if I don't want to go anywhere? What if I want to stay here and help rebuild what was destroyed? What if I want to learn ranching and raise cattle and figure out who I am in this place that doesn't have any expectations of me?" "Then I'd be honored to have you," Cole said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "But Lila, I need you to understand something. If you stay, it has to be because you choose to, Not because you're grateful, not because you feel obligated, not because you don't know where else to go. It has to be your choice, made freely, with no pressure or expectation. I understand. Lila moved closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. And I need you to understand something too. I'm not staying because I need you to take care of me. I'm staying because I choose to build a life beside you, as an equal partner. Someone who pulls her weight and makes her own decisions and isn't afraid to tell you when you're wrong. Cole smiled, and it transformed his tired, wounded face. That sounds perfect. There's one more thing, Lila said, her heart pounding. I'm not ready yet. For anything permanent, anything that looks like a claim. I need time to just be myself, to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by fear or obligation. But someday, maybe someday, I'll be ready for more. If you're willing to wait. I'll wait as long as it takes, Cole said. And if that someday never comes, I'll still be grateful for every day you choose to be here. They stood there as the sun sank toward the horizon, not quite touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. It wasn't a traditional ending, with a kiss and a wedding and happily ever after declared. But it was real and honest and full of possibility. That night they worked side by side to make the damaged cabin livable, clearing debris and boarding up the worst of the holes. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. There was a new understanding between them, a foundation being built that was stronger than romantic declarations. As Lila lay in the bed that night, still Cole's bed, though he insisted she keep it while he took the floor, she thought about everything that had changed since that day in Red Mesa. She'd gone from being a powerless woman facing a whipping to someone who'd stood up to her oppressor and won. She'd discovered strength she didn't know she had. She'd found people who would stand beside her, and she'd found a place where she could build a life on her own terms. Sleep came easily for the first time in weeks, without nightmares or fear. Just the peaceful darkness of exhaustion and safety. The weeks that followed were full of hard work, but also surprising joy. True to her word, Anna returned with her sons and several other neighbors, and together they rebuilt the barn in 3 days of concentrated effort. The new structure was even better than the original, with reinforced walls and a proper loft. Jack Holloway from the Copper Springs Gazette came to interview them, writing a follow-up story about the Battle of Iron Ridge that painted them all as frontier heroes. Lila protested that they weren't heroes, just people who'd stood up for what was right. But Jack insisted that was exactly what heroes were. News came through Anna's network that Silas Crow had been tried and convicted on multiple charges. His ranch and assets had been seized to pay his debts and legal fees. He'd been sentenced to 10 years in territorial prison, his power and influence completely broken. Some of his former employees had testified against him, telling stories of intimidation and illegal activities that had gone far beyond just pursuing Lila. Marshal Warren visited Iron Ridge personally to tell them that several other women had come forward after reading Lila's story, sharing their own experiences with men who'd tried to control them through violence or legal manipulation. "You started something," he told Lila, "a conversation that needed to happen. The territory's changing because of what you did." As summer turned to autumn, Lila fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to rope and brand cattle, to mend fences, to read the weather and the land. Cole taught her patiently, treating her as a student, but also as an equal partner in decision-making. When she disagreed with his approach to something, he listened and often incorporated her suggestions. They learned each other slowly, in small moments rather than grand gestures. The way Cole always made sure there was coffee ready before Lila woke up. The way Lila started leaving wildflowers on the table after her morning rides. The way they worked side by side without needing to fill every silence with words. Danny and Tommy became regular fixtures at the ranch, helping with the work, but also bringing laughter and youth to a place that had been too quiet for too long. Lila taught them to read better. Cole taught them advanced horsemanship, and they all learned from each other. Anna became the closest thing to family Lila had known since her mother died. The older woman's wisdom and no-nonsense approach to life helped Lila navigate the complicated process of figuring out who she was and who she wanted to become. Winter came early to the high country, covering the valley in snow that transformed the landscape into something magical and pure. On a particularly cold night in late December, Lila and Cole sat by the fireplace after finishing the evening chores. The cabin was warm, the wind howled outside, and everything felt peaceful in a way Lila had never experienced before. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said, breaking the comfortable silence.
Of course. Are you happy? Really happy, not just safe or content, but actually happy? Lila thought about the question carefully. 6 months ago, happiness had seemed like an impossible dream, something other people got to experience. Now? Yes, she said, and meant it completely. I wake up every morning and choose how to spend my day. I work hard, but I work for myself. I'm building something that's mine, and I'm surrounded by people who see me as a person, not a possession or a problem. So yes, Cole, I'm happy. Cole smiled, and in the firelight he looked younger, less burdened by the ghosts that had driven him for so long. Good. That's all I wanted, for you to have the freedom to be happy. What about you? Lila asked. Are you happy? Happier than I've been in 15 years. Maybe happier than I've ever been. Cole looked at her with an expression that made her heart skip. You changed everything, Lila. Not just by being here, but by showing me that sometimes the right thing does win, that standing up matters, that you don't have to carry guilt forever. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire crackle. Then Lila said quietly, Remember when I said I needed time to figure out who I was before I could think about anything more? I remember. I think I'm starting to know who I am now and what I want. Lila took a deep breath, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I want this ranch, this life, this partnership we've built. I want to keep building it together, not just as business partners, but as something more. If you still want that too. Cole's eyes widened. Are you saying... I'm saying that I choose you, Cole Maddox, not because I need you or because I owe you or because I don't have anywhere else to go, but because you're a good man who treats me as an equal, because we work well together, because when I think about the future, I want you in it. She paused. That is, if you still want me. Cole laughed, a sound of pure joy. If I still want you? Lila, I've wanted you since the moment you stood on that porch and told Silas Crow that you'd rather starve free than feast in a cage. I've just been waiting for you to be sure. I'm sure, Lila said firmly. I've never been more sure of anything. Cole stood and pulled her to her feet, his arms wrapping around her carefully, as if she were something precious. Then if you'll have me, not as your rescuer or protector, but as your equal partner in building a life, I'm yours. And I'm yours, Lila said, not as property, but as a choice freely made. They kissed then, slow and sweet, a promise of partnership sealed not with words, but with the understanding that they'd both found what they'd been searching for. Not a fairy tale ending, but something better, a real beginning built on mutual respect and freely given love. Spring came to Iron Ridge with a riot of wildflowers and new calves. Cole and Lila were married in a simple ceremony officiated by Marshal Warren, with Anna and her sons and half the territory in attendance. Jack Holloway wrote about it in the Gazette, calling it a union that represents the best of frontier values: equality, choice, and courage. Lila wore blue, the color of the sky before sunrise. She carried wildflowers from the valley. And when the marshal asked if she took Cole Maddox as her husband of her own free will, she answered with absolute certainty, I do. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Word spread about the woman who'd stood up to Silas Crow, and Iron Ridge became a kind of symbol, proof that even in the harsh frontier, justice could prevail, and the powerless could become powerful through courage and solidarity. Other women sought Lila out, asking her advice, sharing their own stories of oppression and escape. She listened to each one, offering what help she could, creating a network of support that stretched across the territory. Anna called it the beginning of something important, a movement toward real equality. In late autumn of that second year, Lila discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of joy and fear. Joy at the new life growing inside her, fear about bringing a child into a world that could still be harsh and unjust. But when she told Cole, his face lit up with such pure happiness that her fear began to fade. We'll raise them right, he said, his hand gentle on her stomach. Teach them to stand up for what's right, to treat everyone as equals, to never let fear stop them from doing what's necessary. Them, Lila laughed. It's one baby, Cole. For now. But I'm hoping for a whole passel of kids running around this ranch, teaching them all to rope and ride and read and think for themselves. As winter approached again, Lila stood on the porch of the rebuilt cabin,
her hand resting on her growing belly, looking out at the valley that had become her home. The red ridges glowed in the setting sun. The creek ran clear and cold, cattle grazed in the distance. Everything was exactly as Cole had described it that first night when he'd offered her sanctuary. Beautiful, remote, peaceful. But it was more than that now. It was hers. Not because a man had given it to her, but because she'd fought for it, built it, earned it through sweat and courage, and the absolute refusal to let anyone define her worth. Cole came to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist. They stood together as the sun sank below the western mountains, watching their land fade into peaceful darkness. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Lila thought back to that day in Red Mesa, to the moment she'd chosen a whipping over submission, to the desperate flight through the Badlands, to the confrontation that could have ended in death. She thought about everything she'd sacrificed and everything she'd gained. "Not one," she said firmly, "not a single one." And she meant it, because what had begun with a whip cracking through desert air had ended with freedom, the kind of freedom that couldn't be taken away because it wasn't granted by anyone else. It was earned. It was chosen. It was hers. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lila Maddox stood beside her husband on their land, their future growing inside her, and felt something she'd never known in Red Mesa. Not just safety or contentment, but genuine peace. The peace of a woman who'd taken control of her own story and written an ending that was entirely her own. The frontier had promised freedom to anyone brave enough to claim it, and Lila had proven that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was simply refuse to accept the future others had planned for them. That refusal had changed everything, not just for her, but for everyone who'd witnessed it. And in the years to come, when other women found themselves in impossible situations, they would remember the story of Lila Mercer who stood up to Silas Crow and won. They would remember that courage was contagious, that solidarity was powerful, and that sometimes the word no was the most revolutionary thing a person could say. But for now, on this quiet evening at Iron Ridge, Lila simply stood with Cole and watched the stars emerge one by one, each bright point a promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in her life, tomorrow didn't frighten her at all.